Hello everyone, welcome to Frightening Tales. I know many of you enjoy listening to these videos as you fall asleep, so before you drift off, I'd love for you to leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're tuning in from, and if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Alright, now let's get comfortable, relax and dive into tonight's case. Story 1. The central figure in today's case is Ingulf Turk, a 58-year-old man. Born in Germany, charismatic and particularly adept at charming women, Ingulf possessed an imposing presence. With his large, powerful hands, rippling muscles and athletic build, he turned heads wherever he went. People often likened him to a real-life Arnold Schwarzenegger, yet behind this rugged exterior lay a calm, composed demeanor. Ingulf was passionate about skiing in the Alps, smoking cigars and riding motorcycles. By his own account, as a teenager in East Germany, his talent in pole vaulting earned him a spot as a reserve athlete on the Olympic team that competed in the 1980 Moscow Games. Later, Ingulf pursued and completed his medical degree at the University of Berlin, graduating just months before the Berlin Wall fell in 1989. Ingulf trained at Berlin's Charité Hospital, one of Europe's largest medical institutions. There he became a specialist in endoscopic prostate surgery, a lesser-known procedure used to remove cancerous prostate glands. Crowds would gather just to watch him operate, marveling at his exceptional skill and expertise, but no one could have imagined that beneath this polished, accomplished facade lurked a ruthless predator, a man who would coldly eliminate his own wife. Within the walls of their home, Ingulf was a star among his peers, disciplined, decisive and brimming with passion. He was among the first to master cutting-edge surgical technologies of his time. In 2001 he relocated to Norfolk, Virginia, at the invitation of urologist Gerald Jordan, who sought expertise in applying new techniques for endoscopic prostate surgery. The plan was for Ingulf to stay in the U.S. for 6 months. At the time, he was married to a nurse he had met at Charité Hospital, with whom he had 2 children. However, during his time in Virginia, met another woman. Within a year he married her. After 6 months in the U.S., he returned to Germany. His reputation as a surgical prodigy spread globally, catching the attention of John Libertino, chair of the urology department at Lehigh Clinic, a non-profit hospital in Burlington, Massachusetts. Ingulf worked at Lehigh for 6 years. Though still respected as a talented surgeon, he no longer held the pioneering edge he once had. Other surgeons had mastered the techniques that once set him apart, and his skills became less unique. His fame began to wane. Meanwhile, robotic-assisted surgery was gaining traction worldwide. In 2008, Ingulf accepted an offer to become chief of urology at St. Elizabeth's Medical Center in Brighton, Massachusetts. The medical center prominently featured Ingulf in its advertising campaigns for robotic surgery. He quickly earned recognition as one of St. Elizabeth's top surgeons. The hospital even produced a promotional video showcasing Ingulf riding a motorcycle to work and training in the gym, emphasizing that a surgeon's work demands not only intellect but also physical prowess. During his tenure as chief of urology in Brighton, his second wife filed for divorce in 2015. Those close to Ingulf described the second divorce as one of the most painful chapters of his life. The process was protracted and exhausting, lasting over 2 years due to disputes over custody of their 2 children. Ultimately, custody was awarded to his ex-wife, whom Ming criticized as irrational and volatile, accusing her of restricting his access to their children and refusing to co-parent. The divorce was finalized on May 3, 2017. In November of that same year, Ingulf faced a medical malpractice lawsuit from a patient named Robert Young. Young alleged that Ingulf had failed to fully remove cancerous cells during a prostate surgery, leading to a recurrence of the disease. A year after filing the lawsuit, Young passed away, leaving behind 2 orphaned children. Also in November 2017, Ingulf met Kathleen McLean, born on August 15, 1974 in Dover, Massachusetts. Kathleen Later moved to Belmont where she completed high school with her striking red hair and green eyes. Kathleen was 45 years old at the time. Kathleen had 3 children from previous relationships she had. Studied occupational therapy at the University of Massachusetts and worked at a preschool. Additionally, Kathleen was a practitioner of Reiki, a Japanese alternative medicine technique involving energy transfer through the hands to promote physical and emotional healing. She ran her own Reiki business, Birch Energy and Healing, named after her deep affinity for birch trees, which she viewed as a sacred ladder connecting earth and sky. Friends described Kathleen's passion for energy work as boundless. She was always eager to help others. She firmly believed love could heal even the deepest wounds. Kathleen also loved strolling through Massachusetts forests and beaches. Her favorite flowers were sunflowers and blue hydrangeas. A natural at making friends, she was active in various volunteer groups and hosted annual Christmas parties in Gulf. And Kathleen met online in November 2017, both having recently divorced. Kathleen was living in a modest home in Sudbury at the time. She was captivated by Ingolf's rugged charm and his stories of starting his surgical career in communist East Germany. Ingolf, meanwhile, owned a sprawling 5,400 feet home valued at approximately $17 million. He admired Kathleen's beauty and her devotion to raising her children there. First date took place at a restaurant with live music, followed by a motorcycle ride through the streets of Dover. Just 4 months later, Ingolf proposed to Kathleen and invited her and her children to move into his home. He also suggested she sell her own house in March 2019. 4 months after their engagement, Kathleen and her children moved in with Ingolf. From that point, Kathleen contributed roughly $1,000 per month toward the mortgage, as well as renovations to the basement gym and outdoor pool. Each evening they would walk hand in hand through Dover streets with their dog Cooper. To neighbors they seemed like the perfect couple. Kathleen's therapy license expired in August 2019 and she did not renew it, as Ingolf had urged her to stop working. After moving in with him, had the neighbors known this, they might have sensed something was amiss. The year 2019 marked a turning point in Ingolf's life, both professionally and personally. On May 31, 2019, he saw his last patient at St. Elizabeth's Medical Center. By November, the Massachusetts Attorney General's office ordered him to repay $150,000 to the Mass Health Program for billing for surgeries and consultations he never performed over the past 6 years. Additionally, to continue practicing medicine, Ingolf was required to fund and complete a multi-year remediation program at his own expense. Staff at St. Elizabeth's confirmed that Ingolf officially ended his tenure there in February 2020. From that point, his relationship with Kathleen began to deteriorate sharply. Ingolf spent much of his time at home in a state of despondency exacerbated by heavy drinking. He slept poorly, often waking in the middle of the night to work out in the basement gym, yet he rarely bathed. Ingolf kept the investigation and malpractice allegations hidden from Kathleen, but one day she discovered the truth. The turning point came when Ingolf returned to Germany and Kathleen McLean stumbled upon a safe he kept hidden in their home. Inside, she discovered documents detailing both the malpractice lawsuit and the investigation against him. In that moment, as she later confided to a neighbor, Kathleen realized she had never truly known the man she married. Ingolf's demeanor and behavior grew increasingly erratic, marked by instability and jealousy. Once, upon finding their shared wardrobe in disarray, he tore every item out and demanded Kathleen reorganize it meticulously. He also forbade her from using any vehicles, neither his Mercedes-Benz nor her own SUV. In December 2019, during a heated argument in their bedroom, Ingolf snapped. He seized Kathleen, slammed her head against the bed frame, choked her with one hand, and smothered her nose and mouth with the other. Kathleen began to lose consciousness. When she came to, she screamed so loudly that one of her children heard and rushed upstairs. Later she texted a close friend confessing that as her vision faded, the last thing she saw was Ingolf's face contorted with rage. She genuinely believed he intended to kill her. Afterward, Ingolf apologized, insisting he still loved her. The following week they flew to Las Vegas and exchanged vows in a chapel ceremony on January 11, 2020. While conducting a Reiki session, Kathleen turned off her phone. When she returned home, Ingolf was waiting at the door. He had called her repeatedly during her absence. Unable to reach her as she approached, he grabbed her with his powerful hands, lifted her off the ground and abruptly let go. Kathleen fell hard, her back slamming into the ground, the impact so severe that her shoes flew off. When she demanded an explanation, Ingolf coldly replied. Less than a month later, Kathleen visited the Dover police station stating she was preparing to file for divorce and wanted officers present during the process to ensure her safety. She refrained from pressing criminal charges, fearing public exposure of the divorce would further complicate Ingolf's legal troubles. Court records show the divorce petition was drafted on February 7. Kathleen told police that since losing his job, Ingolf had grown increasingly volatile, aggressive and controlling. As evidence, she revealed he used a tracking app to monitor her location at all times. He frequently checked her phone to see who she was contacting, and their home was fitted with cameras throughout. On one occasion, he demanded she print detailed logs of her incoming and outgoing calls so he could learn more about those people. Kathleen, who was fit and regularly jogged to stay in shape, found Ingolf now controlling even her weight. A friend noticed Kathleen had changed drastically since her relationship with Ingolf began. Her makeup became haphazard, her once vibrant hair neglected. It was as if her vitality had been drained. One day, while helping her youngest son with a school project, Ingolf approached and declared he then leaned in and snipped a lock of her red hair. When Kathleen tried to stop him, the scissors grazed her skin. During a party at their home, Kathleen confided to a few friends that she could no longer endure the marriage. Ingolf later learned of her disclosures. As the guests left, Kathleen approached her husband and sat on his lap in a gesture of reconciliation, but he shoved her to the floor. That moment solidified her resolve. She had to go to the police and recount everything that had transpired over the past months at the station. Kathleen also expressed concern about Ingolf keeping firearms in the house. When officers learned of the weapons and the prior choking incident in December 2019, they raised an immediate red flag. The choking was deemed one of the gravest indicators of domestic violence, signaling a potential escalation to lethal force. The police urged Kathleen to file a formal complaint, and she agreed. She then drove her Jeep to the district court, where she was told to return to the police station for further assistance. After filing, as the paperwork was being processed, Ingolf unexpectedly entered the room. He claimed he was there because he feared Kathleen was giving false statements. He insisted that she was the jealous and controlling one and that he had never been violent. Shortly after Kathleen was granted a restraining order, she drove home and showed Ingolf the order, but he refused to leave the house. Terrified, Kathleen called the police. They instructed her to leave immediately and dispatched a team to Ingolf's residence. When they arrived, he greeted them at the door. The officers demanded he show them the safe where he stored his weapons. They confiscated 5 handguns, ammunition and his firearms license. Ingolf packed his belongings and left. He alternated between staying in hotels and a friend's mobile home in Florida. Though no longer living with Kathleen and her children, he found ways to assert his presence. He can led their home water delivery service, even demanding the company retrieve all unused bottles. He also tried to repossess Kathleen's Jeep and tampered with the home's heating system, leaving the house frigid. On February 6, 2020, Ingolf was summoned to court for violating the restraining order. He faced charges of domestic assault, 2 counts of assault with a dangerous weapon, and 1 count of strangulation. He pleaded not guilty. Kathleen was devastated by the judge's ruling. Ingolf was permitted to sell the house, and she and her children were ordered to move out by July 2020. Despite their marriage, the house remained solely in Ingolf's name. Kathleen confided to a friend who she had hired as a bodyguard that Ingolf had an immense ego and an authoritarian streak. He had spent his life crafting an image of perfection as a brilliant surgeon, but she believed he suffered from a god complex, a trait often associated with narcissism. She also discovered that his claim of being selected as an Olympic reserve for the 1980 Moscow Games was a fabrication. Two of the three team members she contacted had never heard of him yet. In early May 2020, Kathleen told a neighbor she and Ingolf had reconciled and planned to attend marriage counseling together. She expressed relief that her children could continue their education in Dover. On May 4, 2020, Kathleen requested the court lift the restraining order, stating she felt safe with Ingolf and believed in his commitment to salvaging their marriage. The judge agreed to cancel the order but upheld the pending charges. Ingolf was still required to stay away from the home until the case was resolved. On May 13, 2020, a judge denied his request to return home, a condition of his bail. Despite the restraining order, Ingolf returned to the house for a family dinner. Afterward, Kathleen and the children began playing a game in the living room. Soon the children retreated to the basement to watch TV. Later, Ingolf and Kathleen began arguing over jealousy and text messages. Not wanting the children to overhear, they moved to the bedroom and closed the door. In the early hours of May 14, 2020, one of the children lying in bed heard a noise. Another heard the dog barking and Ingolf's heavy footsteps. The next morning the house was eerily silent. The bedroom door was locked and no cars were in the driveway. At 4:30 a.m., friends of Kathleen and Ingolf received a bizarre text from him accusing Kathleen of being a vengeful demon who manipulated everyone around her. When friends tried to contact Ingolf, he didn't respond to calls or messages. The children, unable to find their mother, called their father, who drove to the house. Finding no trace of his wife, Ingolf contacted the police to report her missing. Tragically, it was too late. During their argument in the bedroom that night, Kathleen had thrown a glass at Ingolf's head. He grabbed her throat and strangled her until she lost consciousness. She collapsed and died. Afterward, he hid her body. On Friday, May 15, 2020, police discovered both of the couple's cars parked near the residence inn where Ingolf had booked a room. From May 8 to 17, he had been staying there intermittently since their separation. Police knocked and called his name, but there was no response. They had hotel staff opened the door. Inside, they found Ingolf with a cut on his head, a wound on his left wrist, and scratches on his legs. The white bed sheets were stained red. Beside him were a syringe and a knife. Ingolf was unconscious and was rushed to Norwood Hospital. Meanwhile, the search for Kathleen, who was not in the hotel room, continued. Norfolk police entered Ingolf's home, broke into the bedroom and found Kathleen's purse and phone. Ingolf regained consciousness 24 hours later. On Saturday, May 16, 2020, during questioning, he confessed to the crime and revealed the exact location of Kathleen's body. After killing her in their home, Ingolf had placed her body in a car and driven to a newly built unsold mansion near their residence left vacant. He dumped her body in a pond, weighing down her yoga pants, the only clothing she wore, with stones. Rescuers recovered Kathleen's body late that Saturday night, May 16, at 11 p.m. Her body was face down 5 meters from the pond's edge, clad only in the stone-filled yoga pants. The scratches on Ingolf's arms and legs came from navigating thorny bushes near the pond. Forensic experts reported a fractured bone in Kathleen's neck, bruising on her throat and neck muscles, and hemorrhages on her scalp and brain. The cause of death was asphyxiation. Kathleen was one of 6 women in Massachusetts killed by their partners since the pandemic began, and her case marked Dover's first recorded homicide in years. Despite confessing and revealing the body's location, Ingolf was indicted on May 18, 2020 he pleaded not guilty. Charged with murder, he was held without bail at Norfolk County Jail. The earlier assault charges were dropped. His defense attorney did not contest the detention but emphasized Ngul's reputation as a skilled surgeon who had helped people of all nationalities, religions and races. The defense claimed Kathleen sought the restraining order to gain co-ownership of the house and vowed to pursue a not guilty verdict at trial. Only Kathleen truly understood Ngulf TW's nature, a man who in an uncontrollable rage strangled his wife. Story 2. On the surface he was an honest, reserved, kind-hearted man who cared deeply for his family, yet this very man was responsible for one of the most shocking murders in Beijing, China. In a mere 20 minutes he unleashed a frenzied attack wielding a knife with over 110 savage strikes. 8 young women in the prime of their lives became restless spirits under his blade, their lives snuffed out in a dormitory. Was it a bloodthirsty nature, or was there a deeper, darker motive? How did a single crucial clue help the police zero in on the killer? Thank you so much. In the early hours of May 30, 1999, Beijing's 1110 emergency hotline received 2 frantic calls in quick succession. The first call came from a young woman, her voice trembling with urgency. "Hurry, there's a man trying to kill us. He's already stabbed several people." As the operator pressed for the location, piercing screams erupted through the line and the call abruptly cut off. The caller's fate was unknown, but the situation was dire. The emergency center traced the call and pinpointed it to the Xianshan district. Moments later a second call came in. Another woman, shaken, reported, "There's a girl lying at the base of my building covered in blood. I think she's dead." The location was Building 2, Handix Residential Area 23, Xianshan, matching the origin of the first call. Thus began the unraveling of a monstrous crime that would shake Beijing to its core. According to the initial police report from the nearest precinct, the victims weren't just 1 but 8. The case was deemed exceptionally grave. Detectives from the city's Criminal Investigation Division, forensic experts and technicians descended on the scene. The first victim was found beside a small truck outside Building 2. She was a woman in her early 20s, her hair disheveled, barefoot. Her body bore 6 stab wounds with a fatal gash at her throat. A long trail of blood on the ground suggested she had been dragged from elsewhere. It was clear she had been chased outside and killed. The primary crime scene was not outdoors. Blood dripped across the building's entrance and stairwell. Bloody footprints stretched up to the second floor. On the landing a pair of women's slippers lay abandoned following the blood trail. Investigators reached room 203 on the second floor, its door unlocked. Stepping inside they were met with a scene of unimaginable horror. Blood coated the walls, floor and beds, the air thick with a metallic stench of gore. 7 other young women lay inside, brutally slain in a manner too horrific to fathom. Room 203 was sealed off as the primary crime scene. It was a 3-bedroom apartment with southern and northern rooms used as bedrooms and a central area holding office supplies and a telephone. 8 victims aged 17 to 24 had been slaughtered. The woman found by the truck was Xiaomi Fong, 22 years old. In the southern bedroom 5 victims lay strewn: Li, 24, Zhang Xuan, 22, Wang Meiu, 17, Wu Shangdan, 20 and Su Hui Quan, 20. Some were sprawled on the floor, others face up on beds. In the northern bedroom was Shu Haong, 24, near the telephone. In the central room was Chin Roer I Hua, 21, the young woman who had made the first desperate call for help only to be cut down mid-plea. All victims were dressed in underwear or sleepwear, suggesting they were attacked in their sleep. Their necks and chests bore deep jagged wounds from a razor-sharp blade. Each had been stabbed through the carotid artery or hardened lungs, dying from acute hemorrhagic shock. The killer's savagery was inhuman. The 8 victims bore over 110 stab wounds, each strike lethal, with no intent to leave survivors in a densely populated residential area in a shared apartment housing 8 women. Such a cataclysmic crime was unthinkable. Given the case's severity, the 5.30 task force was swiftly formed. Examination of the victims' wounds revealed they were all inflicted by the same knife, suggesting a single perpetrator, yet delivering over 110 stabs in such a short time with such relentless brutality hinted at a deep-seated rage. Did the killer harbor a personal vendetta? The investigation began with the victims' social connections. All 8 victims hailed from Fujian province, working as office staff for the Beijing branch of Jinali Arts and Crafts Comedies Ltd. Room 203, rented by the company in 1998, served as both a dormitory and office. These women were sales consultants for gold and silver jewelry at a shopping mall selected for their youth, beauty and poise. All were unmarried, standing between 5 feet 6 inches in and 5 feet 8 inches in. Some had lived there for 8 months, while one had moved in just a day before the massacre as migrant workers. Their social circles were simple: worked by day, back to the dormitory by night. The mall kept late hours, so they often returned after 1000 p.m. Their lives revolved around work and rest, with no apparent enemies. Forensic analysis found no signs of sexual assault or harassment. Motives like revenge, romance or coercion were ruled out. Shifting focus to the crime scene, investigators noted signs of rummaging. Bloody handprints marked several bags in the living room, and cash was missing, though no fingerprints could be lifted, suggesting the killer wore gloves. The search appeared hasty. $2,500 in cash wrapped in newspaper in a drawer was untouched, and several mobile phones remained. The windows and door of room 203 showed no signs of forced entry, indicating the killer entered effortlessly. How did the perpetrators slip in during the dead of night? Did they know the victims? What was the motive? To uncover answers, forensic experts and technicians conducted 11 meticulous examinations of the scene. The Beijing Public Security Bureau's Forensic Identification Center employed cutting-edge DNA analysis for the time, extracting over 80 blood samples and comparing them to the victims to determine their origins. Their efforts yielded a critical breakthrough. Among the blood stains in room 203 in the hallway, investigators found blood from a 9th individual. The police hypothesized this belonged to the killer, who had been injured during the attack. Footprint experts analyzed the bloody prints and discovered they weren't from shoes or bare feet, but from socks soaked in blood. The killer had committed the murders wearing only socks, likely to evade detection, yet still left distinct foot impressions. Analysis of the bloody sock prints confirmed the perpetrator was male, approximately 5 feet 7 inches in, tall, around 300 He entered the scene in socks, slaughtered 8 women in a frenzy, and fled within minutes. The presence of the killer's blood scattered only at the crime scene and hallway led police to a bold theory: the perpetrator lived nearby, possibly within the same residential complex or even the same building. A door-to-door investigation began. Most residents of Building 2 reported hearing disturbances, shouts and cries to varying degrees during the quiet pre-dawn hours. One man, however, drew the investigators' attention: Xiaolian, living in room 202. Right next to the crime scene, with an oval face, stub-bled chin and cheeks, a shallow complexion and bloodshot eyes. He claimed to have slept soundly through the night, hearing nothing. The investigators noted his statement with suspicion. That same day, police began collecting footprint samples from residents. Technicians set up a temporary space in the residential complex, spreading ink and white paper, asking residents to cooperate. Everyone removed their shoes, wore socks, stepped in ink and pressed their feet onto paper. The process went smoothly, with residents complying fully, but none of the footprints matched the bloody sock prints from the scene. Undeterred, the police clung to their initial theory, suspecting they had overlooked someone. A second review revealed Xiaolian Rang had not provided a footprint sample. He had slipped away unnoticed. The police quickly sought out his wife Jing for a private interview. Jing was the caller who made the second emergency report. She recounted that her husband Xiaolin had taken their child to her parents' home that day. She also provided a critical clue as a resident and switchboard operator for the complex. Jean was on duty at the switchboard room during the early hours of the incident. At around 3:30 a.m. she received a call from a resident reporting loud screams from Building 2 Unit 1 second floor, urging security to investigate. Jean immediately thought, "That's my building." After alerting security, she grabbed a flashlight and rushed toward her home, fearing for her husband and child. About 3 minutes later she arrived, and from a distance spotted a body by the base of the building. Approaching with her flashlight, she confirmed the person was dead. In a panic, she ran back to the switchboard and called the police. When police arrived, Jean, with permission, returned home. Finding her husband and son safe, she breathed a sigh of relief. She told Xiao about the murder next door, asking if he'd heard anything. Xiao, eerily calm, insisted he'd slept through it all, echoing his later statement to police. When Zhang pressed, he grew irritated. "Enough, this has nothing to do with us. Stop going on about it." At the time, Jean let it go, reassured, but doubts lingered gnawing at her. During her private interview with police, she opened up about her unease. She recalled suspicious details from that night. After discovering the body downstairs, she looked up and noticed 2 apartments in the building with lights on the crime scene and her own bathroom. From the second floor she could make out a figure inside her home, likely meaning he was awake. Stranger still, his clothes had been washed in the middle of the night, yet he claimed to have slept soundly. The inconsistencies troubled her. Chang's revelations heightened police suspicions about Xiaolan Rang. They tracked him down at his workplace, where he appeared visibly frail. Investigators explained their purpose, collected his footprint and placed him under close surveillance. The footprint analysis brought a breakthrough and new questions. Xiao's left footprint matched the size, shape, and characteristics of the bloody sock prints at the scene, strongly suggesting he was the perpetrator, but his right footprint presented a discrepancy. The big toe and middle toe were unusually close, with the second toe barely visible. Unlike the clear second toe in the crime scene's right sock print, could the killer's left foot match Xiao's but not his right, or was there a second perpetrator with Xiao using only his left foot and another using their right? Such a scenario seemed implausible, for the evidence to hold. The discrepancy in the right footprint could not be ignored. Imagine if only the right footprint had been collected at the crime scene. What a mess that would have been. Xiaolian might have even walked free, but the seasoned footprint experts, with their sharp skills and meticulous experience, quickly identified the issue. The bloody sock prints at the scene were left while the killer was in motion, whereas Zion's footprint sample was taken while he stood still. This difference between dynamic and static states explained the discrepancy in the second toe's impression. That night the police summoned Xiaolan Rang again, scrutinizing every detail as they retook his footprints. This time they closely examined his feet, particularly his right foot, which revealed a peculiar trait. His second toe was unusually long and curled upward, typically overlapping the first and third toes, a distinctive developmental quirk. Reluctantly Xiao complied, slipping on socks, inking his feet and pressing them onto paper as instructed. The resulting print indeed lacked the second toe's mark. Observers also noted he seemed to be holding back, stepping lightly. The police laid out more sheets of white paper, this time asking him to walk. As Xiao circled the paper, his toe joints flexed faintly, revealing the second toe on his right foot. With each additional lap it became more pronounced. Faster steps made it even clearer. Finally they had him walk up a staircase. The new samples consistently showed the second toe distinctly. The prints left while standing versus moving were markedly different when compared to bloody sock prints from room 203 in the hallway. The new dynamic prints were a perfect match. Footprint analysis is a legally recognized form of trace evidence. With the bloody sock prints re-verified, Xiaoliro could now face trial, but the task force's case didn't rest on footprints alone. As previously noted, among the blood samples collected at the scene, a 9th blood type belonging to the killer was identified, indicating he had been injured, though the wound's location was unclear during the footprint interrogation. Police checked Xiao for injuries. His exposed skin showed no wounds. This time investigators demanded he remove all clothing. At this request Xiao froze, then muttered, "Can I have a cigarette?" After smoking 3 cigarettes he slowly undressed, revealing a fresh unhealed wound on his thigh. The truth was undeniable. Technicians collected his blood sample for testing on the evening of June 5. The DNA results came back. There was no doubt Xiao's blood matched the 9th blood type found at the scene with irrefutable evidence. Xia Lirang ceased resisting and confessed to being the murderer who snuffed out the lives of 8 innocent victims in just 1 week. The police had cracked this extraordinarily heinous case. A man living next door with a family outwardly gentle and unremarkable had committed a massacre that horrified the nation. But why? Born in 1962, Xiao Yanrang was 37 at the time of the crime. A Xianshan native and a technician at a machinery tool factory in Beijing. A year before the murders he noticed young women moving into room 203 next door, always dressed stylishly. His wife Zhang had chatted briefly with them, learning they were from Fujian and worked as jewelry sales consultants at a mall. Things seemed normal at first, but Xiao's mind began to churn. Knowing they handled valuable goods daily, he assumed they earned well and suspected their dormitory might hold precious jewelry. Xiao started secretly observing the women. His southern bedroom window was adjacent to room 203's southern balcony. By leaning out he could see their balcony clearly and noticed that was often left open even at night. Dark thoughts took root. He would sneak in at midnight, kill them and steal their money. Who could trace it back to him? Though Xiao later claimed to police he only intended to rob the apartment for quick cash, this was a blatant lie. First, he carried a sharpened fruit knife, a lethal weapon. Second, he made no attempt to disguise his face, signaling his intent to eliminate all witnesses. His motive was clear: murder followed by robbery with premeditated intent. On the evening of May 29, 1999, with his wife on night duty and his son asleep, Xiao monitored the neighbors, confirming they had returned from work. Sensing the moment was right, he prepared meticulously, believing he could act without leaving a trace. The window of his apartment was just a meter from room 203's balcony, as shown in this image, easy to climb across. To avoid leaving shoe prints he wore only black socks, ensuring silent movement after the act. Returning via the balcony was risky, so the safest, quickest escape was through room 203's front door, straight to his own, which he left slightly ajar. He wasn't certain how many people were in room 203, as the sales job involved shift rotations and sometimes fewer people stayed. He guessed only 2 or 3 women would be present, all female, and felt confident he could overpower them. Everything was set. This is a floor plan of room 203. The southern balcony connects to the main southern bedroom. Xiao lay awake past 3:00 a.m. Unable to sleep, he dressed lightly in shorts, donned white gloves, grabbed the sharpened fruit knife and climbed out his window. Gripping his window frame, he stretched one leg onto the neighboring balcony, pulling himself over with ease. Landing, he found an unlocked wooden door on the balcony, slipped through and entered the main bedroom. Everyone inside was fast asleep, unaware of any sound. Groping through the darkness, Xiao moved from the balcony into the room. Bunk beds lined the east and west walls, and a young woman lay on the lower bunk to the east. He struck swiftly, raising his knife and ending her life with a single decisive blow. The first victim was Lai Masher, 24. She screamed instinctively, thrashing on the bed. The noise woke the others. Someone flipped on the light, flooding the room with brightness. Xiao glanced around, startled. He had expected 2 or 3 people, not 6, in this room alone. With the light on, his identity was fully exposed. The room erupted in terrified screams, leaving him no way out. In that moment only one thought consumed him: eliminate everyone and do it fast. Thus began his rampage. After killing Lai Mer, Xiao yanked Wang Meiu, 17, from the upper bunk. The youngest victim, who had arrived in Beijing just a day earlier, hit the floor and was met with a flurry Of wild stabs, the other women, paralyzed by fear, stood frozen, screaming as two of their friends died before their eyes. Xiao lunged at the others, dragging and slashing Jiang Shujin 22, Wu Shengdan 20, and Su Haiquan 20 were all slaughtered on their beds. At that moment the bedroom door swung open. The commotion had roused Xiao Maiyong 22, the group's supervisor. From the northern room she stepped in to check, only to be met by Xiao's startled gaze. He lunged, striking with his knife, but the distance spared her a fatal blow, wounding her instead. Xiao, clutching her injury, turned and fled. Chun Rui Hua 21 from the southern room tried to follow, panicked that the situation was spiraling. Xiao chased them. He caught Qin in the living room, felling her with a few swift stabs. Suddenly screams echoed from outside. Xiaomian had escaped. She bolted out of room 203's front door and down the stairs. At the first floor she pounded on neighbors' doors, crying for help. In the eerie stillness of the early morning, even those who heard her were too frightened to open their doors to such frantic knocking. No one responded. With room 203's door left open, Xiao's cries reverberated back to the crime scene, snapping Xiao out of his frenzy. Noticing his socks were slick with blood, he slipped on a pair of women's slippers and pursued her downstairs. Xiao, still screaming for help, turned to flee as she saw him approach, but weakened by her wound didn't get far. Xiao caught her just outside, unleashing a barrage of lethal stabs fueled by rage. Fearing early discovery, he dragged her body to the wall beside the small truck, leaving a long blood trail. Returning to room 203, Xiao spotted a bloodied woman slumped against the central room's wall. Dialing the police, it was Chun Rui Hua, who, despite her grievous wounds, had crawled to the phone to report the attack. She hadn't anticipated the killer's return and failed to lock the front door as the emergency operator answered. Xiao, back in the room, struck again, sending Chun to her grave. The horror wasn't over. A loud slam came from the northern room's door. Someone was still alive. Shizhaoing 24. The northern room was typically Xiao Mai Fong's alone, but Shu, on a temporary work assignment in Beijing, had been sharing it when the chaos erupted. Xiao had woken first and fled. Shu, frozen in fear, hid in the room until she heard Chen's attempt to call for help. Stepping out and seeing Xiao return, she slammed and locked the door, but Xiao, like a rabid beast, kicked it down with a few blows. Zhouing stood no chance under the cover of night. Xiao Lian Rang mercilessly took 8 innocent lives. Still fearing survivors, he went further, stabbing each victim repeatedly until he was certain no one lived. Only then did he turn to his original goal, money rummaging through the living room. He found only a few dollars in cash and some bags. Infuriated, he realized the jewelry and riches he'd imagined were nowhere to be found. Unbeknownst to him, $2,500 in cash lay hidden in a drawer in the central room, overlooked in his frantic search. Nearly 25 minutes had passed since he entered, and the commotion risked drawing attention. He couldn't linger and fled as planned. He left the room 203's front door, slipped through his own slightly ajar door, and returned home to avoid leaving bloody footprints. He stripped off his clothes, laid them on the ground, and stepped over them to enter in the bathroom. He shredded his white gloves and flushed them down the drain, then washed his clothes and showered. Only then did he notice a deep bleeding wound on his thigh, sustained unknowingly. In his frenzied state, he treated it haphazardly, cleaned up, and returned to his bedroom, where his son still slept. Though he sensed flaws in his plan, he didn't believe the police could trace him. Little did he know his wife's emergency call and subsequent clues would unravel everything. Xiao Yan was a despicable man, resentful of his lowly status and poverty, living a mundane life. He couldn't stomach others faring better. The sight of out-of-town women thriving in Beijing even slightly threw him into a jealous rage. Like many criminals, he fancied himself clever and lucky, seeing the stylish women next door adorned with gold and silver. He thought, these kids beneath me live better than I do, I'll take what's theirs. He believed his crime was foolproof, but his methods were crude, banking on the slim chance of evading detection. Once he Acted there was no turning back, even he likely didn't expect to kill 8 people that night, sparking Beijing's most infamous murder case. Authorities treated the case with utmost gravity, elevating the investigation to new heights by stealing the lives of others. Xiao had dug his own grave on July 2, 1999. The Beijing No. 1 Intermediate People's Court publicly tried this extraordinarily heinous case. Xiao Linren confessed in court. The court sentenced him to death and he was swiftly dealt with after appeals and a death penalty review. On the morning of July 21, 1999, Xiao Lian, the murderer of 8, was escorted to the execution ground, but no punishment could restore the precious lives of the 8 victims. Young women in their prime, striving in a foreign city, they were denied the chance to live full happy lives. Xiao's fate was no loss. Story 3. In Toronto, Canada's largest city, a massive search operation was set into motion on March 23, 2019. Mrs. Jing, who was in Hainan, China at the time, received an unexpected international phone call. The voice on the other end spoke in halting English, barely audible, leaving her utterly confused. Just as she was about to hang up, the caller suddenly uttered the name of her youngest son, Wang Jinlu, in heavily accented Mandarin. Though she couldn't make sense of what the caller was saying, the mere mention of her son's name sent a chill through Mrs. Zhang's heart. A wave of dread washed over her. Was Foam lost, or had he fallen ill? Desperate for answers, she tried to question the caller, but the language barrier frustrated them and they abruptly hung up, leaving Mrs. Jing in a state of panic, her mind ablaze with worry. She frantically dialed her son's number, but no one picked up. Moments later, another call came through. This time it was a man speaking Mandarin, claiming to be a classmate of Wang Jun's in Toronto. His words struck like a thunderbolt. Wang Jun had been kidnapped, his whereabouts unknown, his life hanging in the balance. Mrs. Jing broke down in tears, her hands trembling as she called her husband, Mr. Lu, to relay the horrifying news. But Mr. Lu's initial reaction was one of skepticism. He dismissed it as a scam, a sophisticated new ploy designed to exploit desperate parents. Behind this chilling ordeal lies a tale of overnight riches as fantastical as a page from one night's it. Begs the question, is this a story of human depravity, a collapse of morality, or some kind of dark sorcery spun by a shadowy mastermind? Thank you so much, Mr. Lu reasoned calmly. These scammers use every trick in the book to make sure our son can't answer his phone, creating the illusion that he's gone missing. Then they pose as kidnappers, demanding a ransom, preying on the information gap between us. Once you transfer the money, they vanish into thin air and our son reappears clueless about the whole ordeal. His logic was undeniably sound. 4 years earlier, when phone scams were less rampant, Mr. Lu had already been vigilant about fraud. His words gave Mrs. Zhang pause, though doubt lingered. To be certain, she called the management office of her son's apartment building in Toronto, asking if anyone had seen him return from school. After verifying Mrs. Zhang's identity, the building manager went to check the underground parking garage. He found all 4 of Wang Jun's luxury cars neatly parked, doors locked, everything in order. Hearing this, Mr. Lu grew even more convinced. See, it's obviously a scam, he said. If those so-called kidnappers call back, tell them to do whatever they want with the hostage. We've got 2 sons after all. But a few hours later, his confidence would crumble. During a routine shift change, the building security team reviewed the surveillance footage as protocol. What they saw was chilling. Around 3 p.m., Wang Jinlu, arm in arm with a stunning, statuesque woman, descended into the parking garage. The pair climbed into his Land Rover, preparing to leave. Suddenly a van noted. The narrator's mention of a van here seems inconsistent with later details. It may be a misidentification of the vehicle type. Screeched to a halt directly in front of the Land Rover, blocking their path. 3 masked men leapt out through the Land Rover's windshield. They appeared to exchange a few words with Wang Yin. Moments later, Wang Yin stepped out of the vehicle and approached them without warning. 2 of the men grabbed him by the arms while The third pulled out what looked like a stun gun, repeatedly zapping Wang Yin until he collapsed limp and unconscious. The trio dragged Wang Yin into their vehicle, likely an SUV not a van as initially stated, and sped off into the shadows. The young woman who had witnessed the entire ordeal from the Land Rover sat frozen for several minutes before stumbling out trembling. She didn't even pause to slip on her high heels, carrying them as she staggered away in a panic. The security officer who reviewed the footage was stunned. A mere moment of distraction. Perhaps a quick bathroom break had allowed this horrific scene to unfold. He immediately called the police. After verifying the authenticity of the video, the Toronto police issued an urgent alert, mobilizing resources to rescue Wang Jinlua. They also dispatched Mandarin-speaking officers to contact his parents in China, but Mr. Lu's first reaction to the police call was disbelief. Good Lord, you scammers have the audacity to impersonate the police. Now he unleashed a tirade berating the officer on the line. The police were bewildered. What's going on here? Don't they want their son back? No matter how they explained the situation, Mr. Lu remained unconvinced that his son had truly been kidnapped. Left with no other option, the police contacted the Chinese consulate in Toronto for assistance, but their involvement only deepened Mr. Lu's skepticism. Oh brilliant, now we've got fake consulate officials too. Let's see how many more tricks you've got up your sleeves. I'm telling you, even if the Prime Minister of Canada calls me today, you won't get a single cent. In today's world, Mr. Lu could easily be hailed as a model of anti-scam vigilance. His defiance left the Toronto Police Department baffled. Could it be that the parents themselves orchestrated their son's kidnapping? Nevertheless, the police held a press conference releasing the surveillance footage of the abduction and appealing to the public for any leads on Wang Jinel's whereabouts or the identities of the three masked kidnappers across the ocean. Wang Jin's parents were finally confronted with undeniable evidence. The irrefutable video left them reeling as if the sky itself were collapsing. They booked the earliest flight to Toronto, reaching out desperately to the Chinese embassy, local Chinese community leaders, and the Chinese Business Association, determined to find their son at all costs. Meanwhile, the Toronto Police Department intensified their efforts. They broadcast missing person alerts across television networks and deployed over 200 officers to conduct door-to-door inquiries, racing against the clock to rescue Wang Jinlu within the critical 24-hour window following the abduction. What left people utterly speechless was that beyond the kidnapping itself, public discussions fixated on an unexpected detail: the surveillance equipment. Everyone was asking, what brand are those cameras? How are they so crystal clear? It's hard to blame the curious masses for their peculiar focus. In many Canadian crime cases, you'd be lucky to find a camera within 100 miles, or if you did, the resolution would be so pitifully low, almost touchingly so, that suspects would appear as blurry, genderless blobs indistinguishable from objects. Yet in this surveillance footage, the clarity was staggering. You could make out the embroidered logo on the sleeve of the kidnappers' Canada Goose puffer jackets, not to mention their builds, heights, and the color and model of their vehicle. Most crucially, the license plate was perfectly legible, beyond marveling at the top-tier quality of the cameras, giving their manufacturer a free marketing coup. People couldn't help but wonder, why would this apartment complex invest in such a high-end surveillance system? The answer, however, is simple: money. This luxury condominium, located on Birchmount Avenue in Toronto's Markham district, boasts a gym, a year-round heated pool, and a sauna. Completed just a year earlier, every unit sold out in a flash. The cheapest one-bedroom, one living room unit starts at $518,000, while the lavish penthouses on the top floors range from $1.48 million to $3.7 million. Truly the Hermes of condos. According to the building management, the two-bedroom, two-living-room unit owned by Wang Jinlu, while not the priciest in the complex, came with 4 dedicated parking spaces. These house not only his Land Rover Range Rover but also a Rolls-Royce Wraith, a Ferrari 488 GTB and a Lamborghini Huracan. Wanjin even flaunted a bundle of supercar keys on social media. A glance at Wanjin Lu's social media accounts reveals a relentless parade of extravagance: supercars, gourmet cuisine, stunning women, designer clothes, shoes, belts and high-end phones. If it could be flaunted, he didn't miss a beat while others study abroad to learn. Wanjin seemed to be starring in a reality show about the lives of the ultra-rich, his daily routine showing off wealth and then showing off more wealth. As for the woman accompanying him, police initially suspected she might be an accomplice. After all, if the kidnapper's goal was ransom, why let a key witness walk free? And how could she watch her boyfriend get stunned unconscious and dragged away yet fail to immediately alert the authorities? However, it was later confirmed that she did report the crime after fleeing the building. Her limited English and muddled explanation, compounded by mistakenly giving the wrong address, meant the police didn't take her call seriously at first. As a result, it wasn't until hours after Wanjin's abduction that officers arrived at the scene. She recounted that as she and Wanjin noticed three men in black blocking their car, they were gesturing animatedly, claiming they were scouting locations for a music video shoot and wanted to use his supercar as a prop, but something felt off. The men were masked and not a single camera was inside, hardly the setup for a film crew. She had a sinking feeling and was about to warn Wanjin to stay in the car before she could speak. The naive young heir stepped out, grinning, convinced these strangers had impeccable taste and recognized the value of his car, perhaps even assuming they were kindred spirits who appreciated luxury. Within seconds he was overpowered and whisked away, leaving her stunned in the passenger seat. The police were left speechless by her account. The kidnapper's appearance and behavior practically screamed, "We're here to rob you." Yet Wanjin had eagerly approached them, all smiles, as if making new friends. Compared to his father, Mr. Lu, who had berated the police over the phone as scammers, Wanjin's lack of caution was staggering. If he'd inherited even a fraction of his father's weariness, he might not have been packaged up and taken in less than a round. Given Wanjin's ostentatious habits and lavish lifestyle, the police strongly suspected the motive was financial, a classic case of a mountain bandit targeting the foolish son of a wealthy family. Fortunately, the surveillance cameras proved invaluable. Though slightly grainy, the footage clearly showed three burly men in black. A major breakthrough came from the van's license plate. The vehicle was traced to two Somali brothers with prior theft convictions, frequent flyers at the local police station. Just as the police prepared to apprehend them, a dramatic twist unfolded on the night of March 27 at 9 p.m. in a farmhouse in Gravenhust, a small town over 100 miles from Toronto. A young Chinese man was seen frantically banging on a door, pleading for help. For context, this quaint, tongue-twisting town was over a century ago the birthplace of Dr. Norman Than, a figure later revered in China. Despite the passage of time, Gravenhust retained its small-town virtues: simple, kind-hearted folk ready to lend a hand. Though the young man was disheveled, his clothes tattered, his eyes wild with panic, and his English barely coherent, with scratches covering his face and limbs, the warm-hearted farmers opened their door and immediately called the police. Officers arrived swiftly, rushing the man, who identified himself as Alub, to the nearest hospital. Soon after, they confirmed he was indeed Wanjin Lu, missing for 3 days. Upon hearing their son was safe, Mr. and Mrs. Jing raced to the hospital. The family of three embraced, sobbing in the hospital room, overjoyed that Wan Han had escaped his captors alive. Wanjin later recounted his ordeal. After being forced into the vehicle, the kidnappers stripped him down to his underwear. They dressed him in cheap clothing, chained his hands and feet and taped his mouth shut, forcing him to relieve himself, where he sat over 3 days. He was given only one meal on the first day. For a young man accustomed to a life of luxury, this was sheer torment. The physical suffering paled in comparison to the mental anguish, unable to understand the kidnapper's daily Mutterings, he was left wondering whether they would collect a ransom and release him or simply eliminate their hostage. The torment dragged on until the third night, when they threw a foul-smelling sack over his head and shoved him back into the vehicle. After a bumpy ride, he heard the door open, felt a brutal kick to his backside, and was thrown out into the freezing night. Fortunately, Canada's winter lingered and a thick layer of snow cushioned his fall, sparing him further injury. Wanjin tore the sack from his head and found himself beside a highway. In thin clothing, he stumbled through the darkness toward a faint light in the distance. A small house, unable to see clearly, branches scratched his face and limbs, leaving him covered in superficial wounds. Within a week of Wanhan's rescue, the two Somali brothers linked to the SUV surrendered to the police. Based on their information, authorities arrested a 22-year-old accomplice, while a fourth suspect was believed to have fled to the United States. The Royal Canadian Mounted Police issued an international warrant for his arrest. One might think that with the hostage safely returned, the family reunited and the culprits facing justice, the story had reached a happy ending. But no one could have anticipated the tidal wave of public scrutiny that followed, crashing in wave after wave. The burning questions on everyone's minds: why was Wanjin targeted, and why was he so abruptly released? According to the confessions of the two Somali brothers, they had been watching Wanhan look for quite some time. This young man cruising through Toronto streets in a flashy supercar that changed almost as often as the glamorous women by his side was a walking spectacle of wealth. His ostentatious displays provoked a mix of awe, envy and resentment in these petty thieves, eventually sparking their sinister intentions. Their initial plan was simple: rob him of his cash and the gold Rolex gleaming on his wrist. But when they took him down in mere seconds, a bolder idea emerged. Why not kidnap the kid and squeeze some money out of his wealthy relatives and friends? This impromptu kidnapping plot, however, quickly unraveled into a series of unforeseen challenges. The first hurdle was the ransom demand. Though they found Mr. and Mrs. Siang's contact information in Wanjin's phone and called to demand payment, the language barrier turned their efforts into a farce like ducks quacking at thunder. Frustrated, they gave up and turned to Wanjin's shady Toronto friends instead. The results were equally dismal. Some thought it was a prank, while others simply didn't care. After hours of heated arguments and hoarse throats, they finally convinced one friend to relay the message to Mr. and Mrs. Jean, but that too failed, as Mr. Liu stubbornly dismissed it as a scam. The kidnappers were at their wits' end, their efforts sinking like stones in the sea. For the first time, the abductors were more anxious than the hostages' parents. They couldn't just let Wanjin go, that would be too great a loss after all their trouble. So they stashed him in a dilapidated basement belonging to a friend, stripped him of anything valuable, and locked him away, hoping to figure out their next move. Then came news that was both a relief and a nightmare. The good news: Mr. and Mrs. Jean finally believed their precious son had been kidnapped. Their transcontinental journey to Toronto and the ransom demands at last showing some promise. The bad news: the condo's cameras were so crystal clear that even the pimples on the kidnappers' faces were visible. They feared the police would be knocking before they could pocket a dime. Panicked, they moved Wanhan under the cover of night. As the saying goes, plans can't keep up with changes, especially when these small-time crooks had no real plan to begin with. Hiding a living, breathing person was no easy feat. Driving aimlessly risked a police interception, and soon the kidnappers were bickering loudly inside the vehicle. Out of options, they pulled over at a highway bend and unceremoniously kicked one out with a swift boot to his backside. But was this really just a tale of a gang of bumbling thieves? Many felt the case was far more complex than it appeared. Consider this: 4 ruthless kidnappers driven by greed releasing their hostage without a single penny. It's as absurd as sharpening a knife, boiling water and tying a fat pig to the butcher's block only for the butchers to argue and let the pig waddle free, especially a pig that could run straight to the police. Speculation swirled that the kidnappers must have received some payment to spare Wanhan's life, yet a bizarre contradiction emerged. The Toronto Police Department repeatedly stated that the kidnappers had demanded a ransom from the family, specifically in Bitcoin, a modern twist reflecting their savvy shift away from risky bank transfers or cash handoffs to a harder to trace cryptocurrency. An insider even claimed the kidnappers through one of Wan Hen's girlfriends had demanded 500 Bitcoin, worth roughly 1.92 million US at the time. Mr. Liu, however, insisted he never received any ransom demands, Bitcoin or otherwise. He painted a surprising picture, claiming his son was merely a fake rich kid obsessed with appearances, the luxury condo, the $1 million supercars, all rented for show. He said in Canada, he argued, renting a used car is cheap, unlike in China, where supercars come with astronomical price tags. A small deposit and a few hundred Canadians a month, roughly $222, could secure a flashy ride to fuel one's facade. Yet the Toronto Police Department countered with hard evidence. The supercars and the luxury condo were purchased outright in cash by Wan Hen, totaling over $3.7 million US, all within his first 5 months in Toronto. So who exactly was Mr. Liu? Clearly a man of immense wealth. Why did he insist his family was strapped for cash? Curious netizens dug into Mr. Liu's background, and what they uncovered was jaw-dropping. Mr. Liu was no ordinary man. He was a Taoist priest, the president of the Hainan Taoist Association, vice president of the China Taoist Association, and the director of the Jade Toad Palace in Hainan. His most infamous title, China's richest Taoist. Just how wealthy was Mr. Liu? Some estimated that ticket sales alone from the Jade Toad Palace brought in tens of millions of USD annually, not counting the donations from worshippers or the sprawling 200-acre Taoist complex. A Toronto classmate recalled Wan Han boasting after a night of heavy drinking that his father owned a building worth billions in Shanghai's ultra-expensive downtown, while his mother was linked to over 10 companies. Wan Jin's only concern in life, how to spend his family's colossal fortune in the most extravagant way possible. The title China's richest Taoist was no exaggeration. The traditional image of a Taoist, aloof, ethereal, untainted by worldly desires, like the 7 immortals of Quan Hun, shattered, replaced by a slick, money-drenched Mr. Liu. This sparked a question: how could a Taoist priest amass such wealth and still marry and have children? Mr. Liu had addressed this himself. He belongs to the Zhangyi sect of Taoism, which permits eating meat, marrying and raising a family. In his words, he could enjoy both worldly pleasures and spiritual practice without conflict. Moreover, he wasn't born into Taoism but stumbled into it midlife. His first teacher, astonishingly an African man, he recounted a trip to South Africa in late 1995 with a business delegation. After wrapping up, they dined at a local restaurant without a translator, staring at a pictureless menu like it was an ancient script. Too proud to admit their confusion, they randomly ordered 4 dishes. Only 2 arrived, replaced by a group of locals who surrounded their table singing and dancing. The atmosphere was lively, but vibes don't fill stomachs, especially when the bill still charged for 4 dishes. Feeling swindled, Mr. Liu was fuming, ready to confront the restaurant owner. Just then a black man from a nearby table intervened, speaking fluent Mandarin. Friend, you did order 4 things, he explained, but only 2 were dishes. The other 2 were songs. The menu and song list are printed together. Once the misunderstanding was cleared, the man struck up a conversation with Mr. Liu's group. He revealed he had studied in Beijing for years, specializing in Eastern culture, particularly Taoism. Before parting, he gifted Mr. Liu a copy of the Tao Te Ching. From that moment, Mr. Liu's fascination with Taoism took root, and 3 years later he formally entered the priesthood. It's a story that feels faded if Mr. Liu knew that decades later 4 African men would kidnap his son. Would he muse that destiny's trials cannot be escaped? But how did an ordinary Taoist become so fabulously wealthy in 2002 while vacationing in Hainan. Mr. Lu visited Wenbi Peak in Ding'an County. Amidst rolling mountains and misty clouds he glimpsed a golden glow, a clear sign of prime Foon land. The local guide confirmed its significance. Legend has it this is where Bai Chan, one of the 5 patriarchs of the southern school of Taoism, attained immortality. Inspired not by spiritual enlightenment but by a business opportunity, Mr. Luo returned home and sold off his assets and business ventures. Pooling over a decade's worth of savings, he signed a long-term land lease with the Hainan government and tirelessly secured loans for what to build a Taoist temple on that sacred ground. The Hainan government, eager to boost cultural tourism, gave him the green light and approved a loan of $49 million. 3 years later, the majestic Jade Toad Palace was complete. Over 20 additional shrines were built nearby, transforming the site into the world's largest Taoist complex, surpassing historic sites like Mount Wuang and Mount Qingqing. With government backing, it was later designated a national 4A-level tourist attraction, becoming a veritable treasure. Basin ticket revenue was substantial, but Mr. Blue, true to his motto, "The faithful may be poor," but this priest does not maximize profits by charging for rituals and turning the temple into an integrated wellness resort, blending health, spirituality and leisure. Thus Mr. Lu rose to become China's premier Taoist priest, rivaling Shaolin Temple's abbot Shi Yongxin, who also commands billions in assets. Together they showed that modern spiritual leaders could scale not only the peaks of faith but also the Everest of wealth. Yet such wealth made Mr. Lu a target. In 2018 he was embroiled in a scandal when a young woman allegedly swindled him out of $364,000. In just 20 days she claimed the money was a gift, citing an intimate relationship where they called each other husband and wife in messages. Mr. Luo insisted he was deceived and sued her in the courtroom drama dubbed the Twist versus the Vixen. Mr. Lu's deep spiritual prowess prevailed. The woman was sentenced to 15 years in prison, fined $14,000 and ordered to repay over $280,000. Perhaps this ordeal tightened Mr. Lu's anti-scam instincts, explaining his staunch refusal to believe his son was kidnapped. Was at once bitten by a snake. 10 years fearing ropes or no matter the scam's tricks, hold fast to your wallet and all will be well. Curiously, the saga of the rich Taoist pampered son took another turn in December 2021 when the 4th suspect was apprehended in Minnesota, USA after a drunk driving incident. Police found illegal drugs and an unregistered firearm in his car, leading to his detention. A background check revealed he was the fugitive wanted by Canadian police for 3 years. After his arrest, the Wrangler quickly confessed, shedding light on lingering questions. He had planned to extort a ransom from Mr. Blue before fleeing and had indeed demanded 500 Bitcoin through an intermediary, but Mr. Lu's response was baffling. Bitcoin, what's that? Only 500. Is this worth more than US dollars? Exasperated, the kidnapper tried explaining cryptocurrency, what it was, how to buy it, how to transfer it. As his throat grew, Mr. Lu's retort nearly pushed him over the edge. If this isn't a scam, what is? Defeated by Mr. Lu's unyielding skepticism, the kidnapper gave up, deciding to cut his losses and release Wan Han. His role in demanding the ransom earned him the harshest sentence of the 5 years and 6 months in prison. The story's central figure, Wan Jin, returned to China soon after his rescue. Perhaps Canada felt too perilous, and inheriting his family's vast fortune at home seemed a safer bet. Whether this ordeal taught him, like his father, to learn wisdom from a fall remains unknown. Story 4. On a sweltering summer afternoon in 2019 in a small village in China, 2 young girls excitedly attempted to recreate a popcorn-making stunt from a viral video by Office foodie Mize. A mere minutes later, a deafening explosion shattered the quiet. One girl lost her life, the other was engulfed in flames, her body ravaged by burns. What began as an innocent game spiraled into a tragedy that ignited a firestorm of outrage and debate. Online, who is to blame, the vlogger with hundreds of millions of views or the platform that allowed risky content to thrive, once celebrated as an inspiration? Miza found herself vilified, branded a social media villain, yet behind the scandal lies more than a fall from grace or a disappearance from the digital spotlight. It's the story of Miza's quiet, resilient and conflicted journey of redemption, a tale that forces us to confront the very nature of the online world we trust every day. On August 22, 2019, in the stifling midday heat of Lingtan Trang village, Yong'an town, Shandong province, China, Mrs. Lemay was dozing lightly when a dull boom jolted her awake from the house next door. At first she dismissed it as the usual mischief of neighborhood kids and hesitated to get out of bed, but moments later a blood-curdling scream shattered the village's tranquility. "Help, save JJ." Panicked Mrs. Lee rushed to her neighbor's house and froze at the horrifying sight before her. 14-year-old Choi Jae lay motionless on the floor, her body charred, her clothes melted into her scorched skin. Beside her, 12-year-old Xiao sobbed uncontrollably, screaming for adults to save her friend. The room riot of burnt alcohol with scattered soda cans littering the floor. The desperate cries drew neighbors rushing to the scene. A man nearby braved the smoke and flames to carry JJ outside. Her body was catastrophically burned, her skin a raw blistered red, barely an inch left unmarred. When JJ's 18-year-old sister Chio Shinran arrived, she collapsed in shock, cradling her trembling sister amid excruciating pain. JJ managed to stop her sister with a frail, haunting question: "Sis, is my face ruined?" From a young age JJ had loved dressing up, always conscious of her appearance. Despite the agony coursing through her body, she shed no tears, only whispering to comfort her sister, "I can handle it." Bystanders stood helpless, waiting for the ambulance in a haze of despair. None had the expertise to treat severe burns. Someone tried calling the 120 emergency line for guidance but received no clear instructions. JJ lay in their arms, her face and eyes disfigured, her hands clawed and immobile from incinerated muscles and tendons. Each second dragged on, heavy with dread. It took 10 to 15 agonizing minutes for the ambulance to arrive. JJ and Xiao were rushed to the city hospital in critical condition. Meanwhile, Chu Kong, JJ's father, was working at a machine shop over 12 miles away when a frantic call came from an acquaintance: "Your daughter's been burned." Thinking it might be a minor accident, he dropped everything, hoping it wasn't life-threatening. But before he could reach home, another call from Shinran. Choked with sobs, shattered that hope: "Don't go home, Dad, come straight to the hospital." A chilling premonition gripped him. He raced back to the village, but his phone died, cutting off all contact. Stranded without communication, he begged directions from strangers. Each minute an eternity of torment. At the hospital, the doctors delivered a devastating diagnosis that JJ had burns covering 96% of her body, a horrific figure with nearly every inch from head to toe reduced to blackened necrotic tissue. The doctors were blunt: "With the family treatment will only drain your resources. Her chances of survival are near zero." Still, the family refused to give up, insisting the doctors do everything possible. JJ was rushed to intensive care, teetering on the brink of death as doctors fought to save the girls. The cause of the explosion remained a mystery. At the scene, investigators found several punctured soda cans, some crudely assembled into strange shapes, next to a charred 1 kilogram plastic container of 95% industrial alcohol. Local police initially classified it as a severe accident. Xiao, who miraculously survived but suffered severe burns to her face and hands, remained lucid enough to recount the chilling events from her hospital bed. Her words unveiled the gruesome truth behind the tragedy that afternoon. Xiaoyu and JJ were alone at home. Xiaoyu's father, Bang Xiaoquan, was working far away, and both girls' mothers were pulling overtime at a nearby textile factory to pass the time. The girls went to Xiao's house, where they could piggyback on a neighbor's free Wi-Fi to binge videos. Like many rural kids, they were obsessed with short video Apps like Douyin and Quayo. After lunch they locked the door and scrolled through videos on JJ's hand-me-down phone. From her sister around 3:30 p.m. a doing video caught their attention. A woman using a soda can and an alcohol lamp to make popcorn at her desk, the kernels bursting in a mesmerizing display. Thrilled, JJ exclaimed, "This is awesome, let's try it." Without hesitation the girls set out to recreate the experiment. The video, created by Chinese vlogger Zhao Zai, known as Xie or Ms. Ye, demonstrated how to make popcorn in an office using a soda can, an alcohol lamp and a metal stand with tens of millions of views. The clip's creative and humorous style captivated audiences, but it unwittingly inspired a catastrophic mistake by two impressionable young girls. According to Xiao, they scoured the house for materials to mimic the video. Xiao remembered a 1 kilogram canister of 95% industrial alcohol her father hid behind the sofa used to disinfect wounds from his construction job. They dragged it into the living room. They gathered 3 aluminum Pepsi cans. JJ used scissors to cut one can into a makeshift pot, punching a hole in its side and filling it with corn kernels and sugar. A second can was sliced into a crude stand. Lacking an alcohol lamp like in the video, they improvised with the third can, cutting it in half, pouring alcohol into the base and twisting toilet paper into a wick to create a lamp. Thus a rudimentary popcorn stove was born from seemingly harmless household items. With preparations complete, JJ crouched as the head chef while Xiao assisted. At first everything went smoothly. They lit the toilet paper wick in their makeshift lamp and placed the corn fill can on the stand, but when the kernels didn't pop as expected, they assumed they needed more alcohol. JJ grabbed the canister to pour more, and as she tilted it, the canister exploded violently, unleashing a fireball in the cramped room. Flames engulfed JJ, whose short-sleeved t-shirt and synthetic track pants fueled the fire, melting into her skin. Xiao, in a panic, fled to an inner room by instinct, but felt her face burning. Despite searing pain, she ran back, scooped water from a well and doused it JJ to extinguish the flames. Her brave acts subdued the fire, but JJ lay motionless, her eyes wide open in shock from the severe burns. JJ's smoke-damaged phone became a critical clue. The Douyin app was still open, its history revealing the last video the girls watched. Miss Yes popcorn in a Sodakan clip from her office Xie channel, filmed in 2017. The video carried no safety warnings in it. MS used a glass alcohol lamp to heat the popcorn can, making the process look simple, approachable, even safe. When the cause was confirmed, the victims' families were livid. Both JJ's and SIA's parents argued that Douyin and Ms. Ya bore responsibility. In his despair, Chu Kong, JJ's father, repeatedly called Dion's hotline only to be met with a curt dismissal. "This is beyond our responsibility." Ms. Ya and her team quietly removed the video from all platforms without explanation or apology, deepening the family's sense of abandonment. The story exploded on Chinese social media. On Weibo, the hashtag Office Xiao rocketed to the top as news of the girls' attempt to mimic the video spread. Though early reports obscured the vlogger's identity, netizens quickly identified her, unleashing a torrent of rage. Many changed her profile picture to grayscale, branding her a killer. Comments flooded her posts. "She's dodging responsibility. Prosecute her for reckless clickbait." On Zoo, a discussion thread about the incident drew over 8 million views and nearly 2,000 comments. More than half blamed Ms. Ya and her team for failing to include safety warnings. Others criticized the girls' parents for neglect, while some condemned Douyin for inadequate content moderation. Amid the public's fury, MS vanished from social media for weeks. It wasn't until September 10, 2019, nearly 3 weeks after the tragedy, that she broke her silence with a lengthy Weibo post. "These have been the darkest days of my life." She began expressing profound pain and remorse for the tragedy. She apologized to the girls' families, vowed to remove all potentially harmful videos, and announced an indefinite hiatus to overhaul her channel. She also pledged to do everything in her power to support the victims' families through their loss. However, when it came to legal responsibilities, Xiao Miza firmly denied being the direct cause of the tragedy. The accident involving Ja and Xiao wasn't caused by mimicking my video, she insisted. She pointed out that countless popcorn making videos existed online and the girl's method starkly differed from hers. I only used a tin can and an alcohol lamp, far safer. The girls used 2 cans and no lamp at all. She also claimed that since 2017 her video had included a warning not to try it in an office setting, and that she consistently cautioned viewers against attempting her stunts. Her defense, however, did little to soothe the victims' families' pain and sparked an immediate firestorm of debate on social media. Tens of thousands of comments flooded her post. One side fiercely criticized her, arguing that content creators bear a moral duty. The other defended her, asserting that the bulk of the blame lay with the parents who allowed their children access to dangerous materials like alcohol and fire. The public's outrage weighed heavily not only on Xiao but also on the victims' families, who were grappling to hold on to faint hope for their children's survival while enduring a relentless storm of scrutiny. Amid this chaos, family sought legal counsel. A Shanghai-based lawyer even reached out to Chu Kong, her father, offering pro bono assistance. The lawyer explained that legally holding Doi accountable would be challenging, while Xiao could be seen as more directly involved. According to some Chinese legal experts, primary responsibility rested with the girls' parents for failing to supervise and equip their children with safety knowledge. Next in line was Xiao, whose highly influential content lacked adequate warnings. She had previously admitted that some of her videos were risky. She herself had been burned and singed her eyelashes while filming a hand-grilled fish stunt, yet posted it without cautions. Finally, Douyin, as the platform, wasn't entirely blameless for allowing potentially harmful content to circulate without proper warning labels. While the debate over fault and accountability raged, the Chu family's sole focus was fighting for Xiao's life. Thanks to fundraising efforts led by Chu Kong's colleagues, hundreds of compassionate donors helped cover treatment costs. Doctors at Zhaoyang Hospital poured their expertise into saving her. On August 25 and 27, 2019, Xia underwent 2 skin graft surgeries to restore severely damaged areas on her legs and arms. Throughout her treatment, Xia remained conscious due to the risk of respiratory burns. Doctors performed a tracheotomy upon admission, leaving her unable to speak, yet she communicated through blinks or faint whispers of she. When pain overwhelmed her, her 50-year-old mother never left her side, changing her bandages nearly 90 times. Each night pushing herself to exhaustion but refusing to rest, she leaned against the ICU's glass window whispering encouragement, "Mom's waiting out here, you have to stay strong." Her 8-year-old brother, after school, insisted on visiting, convinced that she will get better soon and play with me like before. Everyone clung to hope for a medical miracle. Tragically, that miracle never came. In early September, condition took a sudden turn for the worse. On September 3, before a third surgery, doctors found her in a deep coma. Unresponsive, unable to withstand anesthesia, the surgery was cancelled and she never woke again. On the morning of September 5, 2019, after 14 days of valiant struggle, small heart stopped beating. Despite desperate attempts at CPR, she couldn't be saved. She passed away at 14, an age just old enough to dream to idolize a social media vlogger who would now forever be tied to her tragedy. Though this case had no villain in a literal sense, it was a stark tragedy born of ignorance and negligence. Juju's death was the heartbreaking consequence of childish curiosity colliding with the blind allure of viral social media videos. The incident ignited a polarized, often vicious online response in China, with extreme opinions targeting both Xiaoyi and the victims' families. This revealed the power and the Dark side of online discourse: threats and insults solved nothing, only deepening the wounds of those involved. Rather than mob outrage, the public needed clarity, viewing the incident through both legal and ethical lenses. A tragedy doesn't end when headlines fade, it leaves lasting scars on everyone touched by it. Xiao would carry physical and emotional trauma for life. Despite their profound loss, chose not to harbor resentment or point fingers, hoping no one else would endure their pain. Their forgiveness stands as a testament to compassion amid adversity. Wake-up call for parents, content creators, and tech companies alike: preventing future tragedies requires a safer, more humane digital landscape where creativity is paired with responsibility and children's curiosity is guided and protected. To fully grasp this tragedy, we must look at the life of the victim and the figure who unwittingly led her to this fateful end. Zhu Xa, born in 2005, was the second of 3 children in a poor farming family. Her parents, both in their 40s, scraped by as laborers. Her mother worked piece rate at a textile factory, her father at a machine shop. Their income barely covered daily needs. Despite their struggles, they prioritized their children's education. Zha's older sister Chu Xaran had just passed her college entrance exams in 2019, a source of immense family pride. Zha, about to enter 8th grade, was a gentle, beautiful girl brimming with warmth at school. She wasn't a standout but was loved for her kind, approachable nature. At home she helped with chores and sometimes brought meals to her mother at the factory. Thoughtful and caring, she remembered friends' birthdays and crafted gifts by hand. Like many teenage girls, loved makeup and fashion, styling her hair, trying on lipstick, gazing in the mirror. She also had a passion for drawing, once begging her parents for art lessons, but their tight finances forced her to teach herself, pouring her love for color onto paper. That summer of 2019, Zhuzha spent her days in the village with her best friend Xiao, who lived less than 200 meters away. The two were inseparable, watching TV, drawing and scrolling through videos on a phone without her own device. Zha borrowed her sister's old smartphone or used Xiao's Wi-Fi platforms like Douyin and Keisho. Opened a magical world of captivating content to their young, impressionable minds. But that innocent curiosity was misplaced when they stumbled across Miza's popcorn making video and decided to try it themselves. As for Miza, whose real name is Zhao Xia, she was a social media sensation in China. Born in 1994 in Chengdu, Sichuan province, and trained in dance, she pivoted to video content creation and skyrocketed to fame with her office cuisine series, from cooking hot pot with a water dispenser to grilling meat with an iron, steaming buns on an air purifier, or frying pancakes in a computer case. Her wildly creative ideas captivated viewers. Her wordless videos, driven by visuals and music, transcended language barriers, amassing a global audience. By 2017, her Miza channel racked up tens of millions of views per video, one hitting 100 million in days. Chinese media hailed her as the top creative cuisine influencer. Brands clamored to collaborate, paying up to 500,000 Chinese yuan, roughly $70,000 US, for product placement. Despite YouTube being blocked in China, her channel hit 7.5 million subscribers by 2019, with 17 million followers on Douyin and 8.1 million on Weibo. From an ordinary employee, Xia rose to vice director of a media company, embodying a new generation of content creators. But fame came with hidden costs. Her daring cooking style drew warnings in March 2018 after a video of frying pancakes in a computer case. Chengdu's fire department posted a Weibo caution about its influence on youth. Xiao herself had been burned while filming the hand-grilled fish stunt, flames singing her eyelashes. An accident she later admitted stemmed from carelessness, yet chasing views she pushed boundaries further, adding only a small "do not imitate" disclaimer as a flimsy shield. Zha and Xiao's tragedy was a searing wake-up call for her reckless content. The shock led her to halt her channel, disband her team, and Close her studio. Plagued by a mental health crisis, she lost faith in the work she once loved. From a star with millions of views, she faced a backlash that sent her audience plummeting. Media dubbed her a one-time phenomenon that collapsed overnight for she. Surviving the explosion came at a steep cost. Her face, deeply burned, remained soothed in bandages for days before healing into a patchwork of scars. Her hands tightly wrapped could barely move. The 12-year-old was unaware that her friend Ja had passed away. Her family hid the truth, fearing the shock would break her in the hospital. She clung to the hope of recovering soon to visit Ja. Believing she was being treated elsewhere, night after night she jolted awake from nightmares of raging flames. Staring at her bandaged hands, she whispered regrets. If only we had money to buy popcorn from the store. If only I'd told my friends to wait until the fire was out before pouring more alcohol. Guilt enveloped her young heart like a shadow. Her father Pong Xiaoquan was consumed by remorse, knowing the canister of industrial alcohol he brought home had indirectly caused the tragedy. He sat in silence, wiping away tears, muttering self-reproach. In this tragedy no one had the strength to cast blame. Everyone had already lost too much. After death, the question of legal accountability grew urgent, yet instead of pursuing a lawsuit, the victims' families chose civil negotiations with vloggers Iawamicha. On September 16, 2019, her representatives met directly with family. They agreed to pay an undisclosed sum to cover funeral costs and committed to funding all of Xia's medical expenses, including reconstructive surgeries for the surviving victim. Negotiations with Xia's family took longer but were eventually finalized, though Xia consistently denied legal liability. Her representative expressed her desire to support both families regardless of who was right or wrong, as a way to ease her conscience and public criticism. Authorities filed no criminal charges against Xiao or Dwing, classifying the incident as a self-inflicted accident. However, precedents existed. In 2013, a Chinese court ordered the producers of the animated series Pleasant Goat and Big Big Wolf to pay 40,000 Chinese yuan, approximately $5,600, to the family of two boys severely burned while mimicking a fire-related stunt from the show. This case reignited calls for stricter regulation of digital content and clearer accountability for creators. This tragedy became a costly lesson for society. It jolted parents awake to the dangers lurking in life hack videos online in the digital age. A smartphone grants children rural or urban access to age-inappropriate content. Teaching life skills and vigilant supervision have never been more critical to prevent online pranks from turning into real-world tragedies. For content creators, the incident was a stark warning about professional ethics. Are views and fame worth risking lives? Creators who once overlooked safety must face their mistakes and make amends. Xia herself admitted to sleepless nights haunted by online threats and even contemplating abandoning her career. From September 2019, Xia halted video uploads amid relentless criticism. Many of her older, riskier videos quietly vanished from social platforms. Advertising contracts were frozen on her personal page. She occasionally shared glimpses of sleepless nights, silent tears, and doubts about continuing her career. After nearly a month in hiding, Miss Xia returned in October 2019 in a short video posted on October 14. She credited loyal fans for giving her strength to carry on. The video carried a bolded warning in its title: creative content, do not imitate. This became a mandatory feature in all her future videos. She also revamped her production process to prioritize fire safety and pledged to engage in community initiatives to atone and rebuild public trust. Yet each new video drew harsh comments accusing her of shamelessness for continuing. Still, loyal fans stood by her, arguing that everyone makes mistakes, and she had paid enough. Surprisingly, the COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020 inadvertently eased the pressure on Xiao as public attention shifted to global concerns and online entertainment. Surged during lockdowns, her videos saw a gentler reception. However, her golden era was over. Her 2020 to 2021 content lacked the viral spark of her past work, with viewership plummeting and her signature playful energy dimmed. Fans noted that the old Xiao is gone, replaced by a more cautious, reserved creator shaped by her ordeal. By 2024, Miss Xiao's YouTube channel retained nearly 14 million subscribers, an impressive feat, though largely a remnant of her peak. Actual viewership had sharply declined, highlighting a gap between subscribers and engagement. By 2022, she stopped producing long-form videos as they garnered only a few hundred thousand views, far below expectations for her team and sponsors. To adapt, she pivoted to short-form videos under 60 seconds, a trend dominating YouTube. The strategy paid off modestly. Many shorts hit 1 to 2 million views, some reaching 5 to 8 million. While far from her million views per minute heyday, it showed a loyal audience still followed her quietly across various platforms. Miss Xiao's once vibrant presence has noticeably waned on Facebook. Her 5.1 million followers see her videos garner only a few hundred views, with scant comments signaling a startling drop in engagement. Her verified Instagram account with 280,000 followers posts irregularly, drawing only modest interaction in China, where she once captivated over 25 million fans. In 2019 now reflects a sharp decline in interest despite a still robust follower count. This erosion has hit her finances hard, once raking in millions monthly from sponsorships and ad deals. She now relies on sparsely sponsored short videos, facing mounting financial pressure. In a rare moment of vulnerability, she confessed that parting ways with Onion Group to start her own studio brought relentless strain. The challenge of funding her team, sustaining creativity and keeping her venture afloat left her drained and anxious, a key driver behind her pivotal choice. In January 2024, Xiao Yi shocked her audience by announcing an indefinite pause to her office cooking series, the hallmark content that had skyrocketed her to fame. In a candid video posted on January 9, she explained her decision: creative exhaustion and inability to surpass her former glory, and dwindling metrics in views, engagement and media impact. She also opened up about the brutal realities of being an independent influencer, balancing relentless creative demands with managing a small business without steady sponsorship. With her passion dimmed, Mizzy dissolved her production team, vacated her office and brought her iconic office cuisine series to a close. I need to reset to zero, she said, focusing on what truly sparks joy: creating videos about home cooking, sharing personal passions like swimming and crafting, and diving into simpler, more heartfelt themes. In her reinvented image, she radiates simplicity, calm and vitality, a woman unshackled from her past, embracing the present. Her bold shift resonated with many online. Devoted fans praised her bravery for breaking free from her gilded cage. One remarked, "Chia is no longer the office foodie, but she remains a beacon of inspiration, resilient, accountable and ready to rebuild from scratch." Rumors on social media hint that she quietly supports burn victim charities and aids rural children in accessing safe internet. Though she avoids publicizing these efforts, such gestures reveal her ongoing commitment to social responsibility. A silent reckoning with her past errors. Miza's story remains a seminal case study for China's content creators, a sobering reminder of internet fame's darker side. The tragedy prompted stricter regulations, bans on children participating in hazardous challenges, and mandates for clear warnings on risky content. Many vloggers now weave safety advisories into their videos, and some DIY channels collaborate with fire departments to create child safety tutorials. Though born of heartbreak, Ms. case has driven creators to confront their ethical duties and societal impact. More earnestly over time the office foodie persona has faded, giving way to a wiser woman who owns her mistakes' lives with purpose and tells stories in a voice that's authentic, unpretentious and rich with depth. Her evolution transcends a mere career pivot. It signals the growth of a seasoned creator bold enough to let go of stardom to rediscover herself. Content creators must muster the to face, rectify and grow from their missteps. As she once said, "Thank you for standing by me, I'll keep forging ahead." Wildly as ever, her fans can anticipate a hopeful new chapter for the once celebrated office foodie. Story 5. Canada is renowned for its vast landscapes and sparse population. With the second largest land mass in the world, this nation is home to just over 38 million people, less than half of Vietnam's population. Canada's birth rate is strikingly low. In 2022 it stood at 1.33%, meaning 133 children were born for every 100 women. To maintain population stability, a birth rate of 2.1% is needed. This demographic challenge has made Canada a welcoming haven for immigrants. In its history, Canada once witnessed an extraordinary baby boom contest. Such a peculiar prize wasn't conceived by the government but by a billionaire with an eccentric vision, Charles Vance Miller. Why did he make such a decision, and how did this so-called baby raise unfold? At the dawn of the 20th century, before his death, a Canadian billionaire drafted a will that declared the woman in Toronto, Ontario, who gave birth to the fewest children in the decade following his passing, would inherit a portion of his fortune. This enigmatic billionaire was none other than Charles Vance Miller, a lawyer, investor and entrepreneur who ran a prominent Canadian distillery. Born in 1854, he passed away in 1926 at the age of 72 in the final year of his life during a lively dinner party. Slightly tipsy from line, Charles made a bold declaration: "Listen up, I'm going to make bedroom athletics the most popular sport in Toronto for the next decade." At the time, those present likely dismissed it as the whimsical jest of an eccentric tycoon. After all, matters of the bedroom were deeply personal. What was this man planning? Yet no one could have predicted that Charles's joking words would come true exactly as he foretold. Charles Vance Miller was a self-made billionaire with exceptional talent. Born into an ordinary family, he studied at the University of Toronto, Canada's most prestigious institution. He graduated with a law degree, earning a near-perfect score of 98% soon after he aced the bar exam, and with his sharp legal expertise and charismatic communication skills became one of Ontario's most renowned lawyers. Within a few years of graduating, Charles established his own law firm, but his brilliance extended beyond the courtroom. In 1897 he acquired BC Express, a company in British Columbia akin to a modern-day courier service where horse-drawn carriages handled deliveries. The company soon secured government contracts to deliver mail in parts of British Columbia. That same year, the Canadian Pacific Railway was preparing to build a major rail line. Seizing the opportunity, Charles purchased real estate along the Georgetown route, planning to sell it back to the railway at a premium. The railway company, sensing his strategy, lobbied local authorities to derail his negotiations. Undeterred, Charles, a seasoned litigator with an unshakable grasp of the law, sued the company. His persistence paid off, and he won a settlement of $300, equivalent to $200 at the time. From there, Charles continued to invest in real estate, capitalizing on every opportunity with uncanny precision. His career soared, his wealth multiplying with each calculated move. Yet Charles's personal life was far less fortunate. He was the quintessential poor student from countless romantic tales. During his university years, he fell deeply in love with a wealthy eyes, only to be thwarted by her parents, who deemed him unworthy of their daughter's status. Despite years of striving to join the ranks of the elite, Charles discovered that his beloved had long since married and started a family. From then on, he seemed to lose interest in romance. In his later years his life grew solitary, his only companions the prized horses he cherished at the time of his death. Charles owned an impressive collection of 7 race horses, including Tartarian, the champion of the 1915 King's Plate, and Troutlate, a consistent victor across multiple owners through a life of triumphs and trials. Charles reached a stark conclusion: money is omnipotent, be it a person or a thing. It's not that you can buy it, it's that you don't have enough money to do so. To prove this, he indulged in a peculiar pastime, secretly standing on his balcony or at his office window, scattering dollar bills into the street below, then chuckling with delight as passers-by scrambled to chase the fluttering money. But that wasn't enough. This billionaire vowed to create a grand contest to demonstrate the immense power of money. He proposed turning bedroom athletics into a cultural craze. Tragically, just over a month after this idea was born, Charles suffered a fatal stroke at his office desk. It was Halloween 1926 when he passed. The billionaire remained alone. His parents were gone and he had no surviving siblings or close relatives. Naturally, curiosity swirled about who would inherit his vast fortune. Some speculated he'd donate it all to charity. Others imagined he'd commission a grand monument in his honor or entrust someone to build a memorial, but such guesses were far too ordinary for a man like Charles. For years he had spoken of experiments testing human nature and the allure of wealth. When his bizarre will was revealed, one could almost picture the mischievous grin on his face as he penned its words. First, he bequeathed a seaside mansion in Jamaica to 3 Toronto lawyers. All 3 were granted equal ownership and access to the property, but with a catch: they could only use it if they all went together. Like a treasure chest requiring 3 keys to unlock the problem, these 3 lawyers despised each other. The mere thought of sharing a vacation was unthinkable. Put them in the same room, and a verbal or even physical brawl would erupt in moments. Furious yet unable to relinquish the lavish estate, they endured each other's company for 6 months before finally agreeing to sell the property and split the proceeds. But just as they reached this decision, a stranger appeared with the property deed in hand. Unbeknownst to them, Charles had sold the mansion 2 years earlier, with the new owner set to take possession after 6 months of grudging tolerance. The lawyers were left empty-handed, outwitted by Charles's cunning prank. Second, he gifted shares in his racetrack to 3 individuals: a loyal racetrack employee, a local politician, and a social activist. The twist: the latter 2 were staunch advocates against gambling, having spent over a decade campaigning to curb horse race betting. Charles's intention was clear: if they opposed gambling, he'd hand them a racetrack to run. He wanted to see how they'd handle it. Predictably, they accepted the shares and, like the lawyers, sought to sell them for profit. But Charles had anticipated this. His will stipulated that only members of the Jockey Club could sell racetrack shares. As a result, the 2 anti-gambling crusaders were forced to manage the racetrack, though they quickly resigned after selling the shares. Their applications to join the Jockey Club made headlines, drawing waves of public criticism. He then bequeathed shares worth tens of thousands of dollars in a winery to several priests. At first glance, this seemed unremarkable until you consider that these priests weren't just clergy but fervent advocates of prohibition. In his will, Charles stipulated that to claim this inheritance they had to accept the winery's dividends and participate in managing its operations. Refusal would see the funds redirected to other clergy. Ultimately, these prohibitionist priests became shareholders in the very winery they'd campaigned against, thrust into the ironic role of overseeing its production. All the beneficiaries named in Charles's were either people he'd clashed with or those he openly disliked during his lifetime, but these were merely the smaller pieces of his estate. The largest portion of his fortune was reserved for a complete stranger. This share would be liquidated after a decade and awarded to the woman in Toronto who gave birth to the most children in the 10 years following his death. Thus began the most audacious baby-making contest in history, dubbed the Great Store Derby, a nod to the Mythical stork that delivers babies in European folklore. Some speculated the name drew inspiration from a celebrated racing team of the era, while others believed Charles saw those chasing his prize through procreation as no different from horses thundering down a racetrack. The announcement of the contest sparked an immediate firestorm of criticism. Toronto's mayor condemned Charles, accusing him of reducing humans to the level of livestock, declaring no amount of wealth can buy the dignity of others. Feminist activists penned scathing editorials branding the contest the perverse whim of a wealthy old man who treated women's childbirth as a jest. The wills clauses deeply wounded many women who felt their struggles were being mocked. Those ensnared by Charles's will decried him as a deplorable figure, wanting others not to fall for his manipulative legacy. Few could have imagined that even from beyond the grave a man so disillusioned with the world could stir such societal upheaval. In response, Toronto City officials sought to invalidate the will. Distant relatives of the billionaire emerging from obscurity filed lawsuits. Unwilling to let such a fortune slip into the hands of strangers, they fought to have Charles's will overturned. However, the question remained, did the will of the late lawyer Charles violate public policy, threaten national interests, or infringe on citizens' lawful rights? His distant relatives argued that the contest would force mothers to endure repeated pregnancies in quick succession, endangering their health and that of their newborns. They further claimed the will could fracture families and lead participants astray. For instance, if a contestant's husband was infertile, she might seek another partner to conceive, a clear breach of morality, they argued. They also pointed out that families with many children could face crushing financial burdens. After reviewing these arguments, the court ruled that individuals pursuing a goal may choose ethical or unethical means, but that choice lies with them, not the will itself. The inheritance dispute escalated to Canada's Supreme Court, where the relatives ultimately lost. It was no surprise that a legal mastermind like Charles, a titan of the law school, crafted a will impervious to challenge. Though its terms seemed outrageous, every detail was meticulously legal, leaving no loophole for opponents to exploit. The furor eventually subsided and the contest faded from public attention. Few took it seriously, but no one could have predicted that 6 years later, Charles's final words, be it a person or a thing, "It's not that you can't buy it, but that you don't have enough money to buy it," would become a prophetic adage. This shift came amidst a devastating economic depression. As a manufacturing hub, Toronto, like the rest of Canada, was hit hard. Within months, unemployment and inflation skyrocketed, leaving 1 in 3 adults jobless. In the depths of this poverty, someone recalled Charles's contest was anyone actually participating. To everyone's astonishment, the contest was not only ongoing but had grown exponentially in value. Shortly before his death, Charles had purchased a plot of land on the outskirts of Detroit, USA for $1.50, 50 equivalent to $2 at the time. By now, that land had been incorporated into plans for a crossbar tunnel to the United States, and the Canadian government acquired it for $75,000. Equivalent to $100,000 Canadian, from $1.50 to $75,000. This wasn't gold, it was a diamond. As a result, the prize for the baby-making contest had swelled to $562,500. A life-changing sum, especially for large families reliant on a single breadwinner. By then, the contest had been quietly unfolding for 6 years. For families already with 4 or 5 children, it ignited a renewed drive to push just a little further. Those starting from scratch scrambled to register for the Great Store Derby, eager to join the race. Charles's bold claim, "I'm going to make bedroom athletics the most popular sport in Toronto," was becoming reality. Later records revealed that in the Greater Toronto area during this period, nearly 2,000 children were born as a direct result of the contest. One can only wonder how the late billionaire would have reacted to such a Staggering figure. Journalists relentlessly tracked the baby-making race, meticulously documenting families in contention for the top spot. Pregnant mothers grace front pages, their latest child's birth order splashed in bold headlines. Updates on the competition were delivered with unwavering precision and professionalism. By 1936, the final year of the contest, the race had grown fiercely competitive. 5 families, each with 9 children, were vying for the crown. Some mothers in these families were still pregnant, leaving the winner's identity shrouded in uncertainty. The first contestant eliminated was Grace. She had given birth to 9 children, but because her husband was an undocumented Italian immigrant, their children were not recognized as legitimate. Her eligibility was revoked. In reality, it wasn't until 1977 that Canada granted citizenship to children born in the country, regardless of their parents' status. Charles's will explicitly stated that only children born legitimately in the Greater Toronto Area would count. Next, a woman named Pauline, who had 10 children in 10 years, faced accusations that 4 of them were fathered by someone other than her husband. Pauline argued that these children were born after she had separated from her former spouse. However, the law at the time only recognized children born within a legal marriage as legitimate. The most tragic case was Lillian's. She delivered her 10th child just a month before the contest's end, but the infant died 3 days later. Of her 9 other children, 1 had also passed away. This violated the will's condition that all children must be alive at the contest's conclusion. In the end, only 8 of Lillian's children survived. Ultimately, 2 women tied for first place, each with 9 living children. After taxes and fees, each received $82,500, equivalent to $110,000 Canadian at the time. In the years that followed, the 3 disqualified mothers filed lawsuits. Pauline and Lillian each received $9,000, $12,000 Canadian dollars, a symbolic consolation prize, a mere fraction of the champion's winnings. The immigrant family, however, received nothing over the final 4 years of the contest. Reporters shadowed each family, exposing the grim underbelly of the more children, more blessings mantra. Though the 2 winning families were fortunate, their husbands escaped the widespread layoffs of the economic depression. They were physically and emotionally drained from raising so many children. These women, most of whom became mothers before age 20, some as young as 16 or 17, endured relentless cycles of pregnancy and childbirth. Their eyes perpetually red and glazed reflected sleepless nights. These mothers had no personal hobbies, existing mechanically from one day to the next. Their husbands viewed bringing home a paycheck as their sole duty, ignoring their children's cries and the towering pile of household chores. Few, if any, of these fathers could recall all their children's names or birthdays, let alone their wives' preferences or their wedding anniversaries. All 4 families who received prizes insisted they hadn't had children for the money, claiming a genuine love for their offspring and asserting they would have built large families regardless of the contest. But their actions told a different story. After the contest ended, these mothers, all in their 30s and still in their childbearing years, largely stopped having children. Only 1 gave birth to an additional child. 2 underwent sterilization surgeries, vowing never to become pregnant again. The disqualified families faced even greater hardships. Having pinned their hopes on the contest, Pauline, unable to support her children, sent her 2 eldest daughters to welfare organizations for adoption. Before the court, Lillian admitted that her 4-year-old child had died of tetanus after a rat bite, a tragedy born of her neglect. Her youngest child born prematurely in a desperate bid to meet the contest deadline also perished. Many other parents took reckless risks, having 7 or 8 children in a decade, only to lose the contest and receive no prize money. These are but a fraction of the miseries these families endured. The full scope of their tragedies may never be known. Children in these large families competed fiercely with their siblings For scarce food and their mother's affection, those following the contest were left chilled. Winning the championship and its colossal prize was far from admirable. Who would willingly endure a decade of such agony? What child would choose to grow up amid such tragedy? In the aftermath, Canadians began embracing birth control with greater awareness after World War II. As the baby boom of the 1960s faded, more women pursued higher education and diverse societal roles, balancing careers with family life. They chased personal ambitions and invested in their professions, often choosing not to have children or sacrificing the idea of motherhood entirely. This shift contributed to Canada's steadily declining birth rate. Returning to Charles Vance Miller's contest, it's clear he possessed an uncanny understanding of human nature, using his wealth to expose its frailties even after his death. With his extraordinary will seemingly filled with unthinkable pranks, he acted like a director scripting scenes to highlight human weakness. Yet the baby-making contest likely spiraled beyond even his calculations, leaving countless families to pay a devastating price, living in anguish for a decade or even a lifetime. Story 6. In January 2025, a seismic piece of news rocks South Korea's judicial system. A prisoner serving a life sentence was declared innocent in a retrial and released after 25 years behind bars. This case not only shattered records for the longest wrongful imprisonment overturned in South Korea, but also marked the first time a lifer was set free. Astonishingly, the person who walked out of that prison was a young woman with a slight frame. So what exactly did she endure? Why was her youth stolen within the confines of a cell? Let's rewind 25 years to unravel this story from its roots. On the early morning of March 7, 2005, 50 a.m. a villager stumbled upon a man's body lying lifeless on a road near a bus stop in Wando, a small town in South Jeolla Province, South Korea. Police arrived at the scene and identified the victim as Kim Jun, a 52-year-old man with a level 3 disability, living roughly 4.3 miles from the bus stop. Scattered near the body were shards of a car's signal light, leading authorities to initially classify the incident as a hit and run. But something didn't add up. If the collision was forceful enough to shatter a car's light, the victim's body should have shown visible external injuries, perhaps even broken bones. Yet the forensic report revealed no external trauma or internal hemorrhaging. Instead, it uncovered a blood alcohol level of 0.303%. and traces of the docheamine at a concentration of 13.02 micrograms per milliliter. With such a high alcohol level, enough to render someone incapacitated and a physical disability affecting his mobility, how could Kim Jun have traveled 4.3 miles from his home to the bus stop? Police theorized that someone had laced his drink with alcohol and sedatives, transported him to the location, and staged the scene to look like a hit and run before fleeing. The perpetrator was likely someone close to Kim Jun. Days later, on the morning of March 9, the victim's eldest daughter, Kim Shin-yi, walked into the police station and confessed. She claimed she was the one who had taken her father's life. Kim Jun had 3 children: Kim Shin-yi, 23, from his first marriage, a 19-year-old son, and a 16-year-old daughter from his second marriage. Kim Shin-yi, a stage actress living in Seoul, appeared to come from a harmonious family, at least to outsiders. The news of her confession stunned the village, yet police had already flagged Kim Shin-yi as a suspect. She had arrived in Wando at midnight on the day of her father's death, but didn't return to her grandmother's house until 5:30 a.m. Those unaccounted for 4.5 hours coincided precisely with the time of the incident, and she had no alibi. In her initial statement, Kim Shin-yi admitted to crushing 30 sleeping pills into liquor, passing it off to her father as a liver tonic. After he drank it, she took him for a drive. As the drugs took effect, she abandoned him on the road near the bus stop, staged the scene as a hit and run. and fled back to her grandmother's house. But why would Kim Shin-yi do this to her own father? What drove her to such an act? She confessed that 2 months prior she learned her half-sister had been coerced by their father into fulfilling his perverse demands, recalling similar abuse she herself endured in middle school. Kim Shin-yi's rage boiled over, compelling her to put an end to it. Compounding suspicions, police discovered that Kim Shin-yi had recently purchased 8 accident insurance policies in her father's name, with premiums totaling approximately $250, equivalent to 350,000 KRW in 2000. A significant sum at the time was financial gain. Another motive: Kim Shin's father-in-law. Kim Shin's father-in-law, was this a desperate attempt to evade justice, or was there a deeper miscarriage at play? The case's trajectory grew murky once more. Kim Shin-yi claimed her initial confession was coerced, not voluntary. She recounted that on the night of March 8, during her father's funeral, her uncle-in-law pulled her aside and said, "Your brother did this to your father. If you don't take the fall for him, he'll be in serious trouble." Under this pressure, she went to the police and falsely confessed. In reality, her brother had a solid alibi that night, ruling him out as a suspect. Further investigation revealed that the story of their father's abusive behavior was fabricated by Oda family members who pressured the siblings to lie. They claimed it would secure Kim Shin-yi leniency or even acquittal. The younger siblings, naive and overwhelmed by their elders, complied. As this narrative spread, the villagers' perception shifted. Locals began sympathizing with Kim Shin-yi, even petitioning for her sentence to be reduced. But how could she explain arriving in Wando on the exact day of her father's death? And what about those 4 unaccounted hours facing police scrutiny? Kim Shin-yi provided a detailed account of her movements before and after the incident, insisting the timeline was verifiable. She explained that on March 1, a week before the crime, she and her brother drove from Seoul to Wando. They planned to return the same day, but her brother decided to stay longer at their grandmother's. Kim Shin-yi returned to Seoul alone. Coincidentally, on March 5, she planned to visit Gwangju near Wando for a friend's housewarming party, intending to pick up her brother afterward. But that morning her parked car was inexplicably damaged in a collision. The repairs delayed her plans, forcing her to cancel the party and apologize to her friends, who proceeded without her. Unable to attend, she also scrapped plans to pick up her brother. When she offered to send him money for a bus back to Seoul, he insisted she come get him. Relenting, Kim Shin-yi rented a car and left for Wando at 6:00 p.m. On March 6, she arranged to meet local friends Park and Kwon that evening to catch up en route at the Taejun rest stop. She called her father to say she was on her way. He was drinking with 2 villagers at home and told her to drive safely, promising to cook chicken porridge for her arrival. The 2 villagers confirmed this. They overheard Kim Jun speaking with his daughter, who urged him to stop drinking. They described their relationship as warm. Noting Kim Shin-yi's frequent concern for her disabled father's health, police later verified that Kim Shin-yi arrived in Wando at 12:55 a.m. on March 7, captured by a checkpoint camera. Kim Shin-yi explained that she didn't return home immediately because she wanted to meet old friends first. At 1:00 a.m. she used a public phone booth at the village's edge to call Park and Kwon privately, but given the late hour, her friends declined to meet, citing the impracticality of going out in the middle of the night. So Kim Shin-yi called her grandmother's house. Her younger sister answered, informing her that their brother and grandmother were asleep while she was painting. The sister added that their father seemed drunk and had just argued with their grandparents. According to Kim Shin-yi, her father became belligerent and uncontrollable when intoxicated. To avoid confronting him in that state, she decided to stay in her car drinking and resting, and accidentally fell asleep. She only rushed to her grandmother's house after waking up. During their phone call, her sister asked where she was, though Kim Shin-yi was already at the village's entrance. She lied, saying she was still at a checkpoint en route. This lie later became a critical piece of evidence against her. Police believed it proved she was orchestrating a premeditated crime by concealing her presence in the village. Kim Shin-yai countered that she lied impulsively, fearing her grandmother would be upset if she knew she'd arrived in Wando, but prioritized meeting friends over coming home. Regarding her alibi, Park and Kwon testified at the preliminary trial, confirming they received her call that night tearfully. They lamented, "If we had met Shin-yai that evening, none of this would have happened." Despite their testimony, police remained skeptical. They suspected Kim Shin-yai deliberately called at an hour when her friends were unlikely to meet, crafting a convenient alibi. As for the incriminating notebook and insurance policies, Kim Shin-yai offered this explanation: her dream was to become a screenwriter, and she often jotted down story ideas in her notebook. These suspicious phrases were merely part of a fictional plot she was developing, and the 8 accident insurance policies. For her father, she explained that at the time insurance was a popular trend, with agents frequently visiting homes to pitch policies, since her disabled father couldn't qualify for standard life insurance. Kim Shin-yai purchased multiple accident policies, intending to compare them and cancel some later. In fact, by the time of the incident, 3 policies had already been cancelled. Moreover, when purchasing the policies, she concealed her father's disability, indicating a potential breach of disclosure obligations. Additionally, the policies required a 2-year waiting period before payouts could be claimed for accidents. Having worked at her aunt and uncle-in-law's insurance agency, Kim Shin-yai would have known this rule. If her goal was to fraudulently claim insurance money by staging an accident, and just 2 months after purchasing the policies she would have been aware that no payout was possible. Logically, she would have waited 2 years to execute such a plan, even if the insurance company mistakenly paid out. The primary beneficiary was not Kim Shin-yai, but her father's second wife, her stepmother. This detail raised further questions. Moreover, Kim Shin-yai insisted that from the moment of her arrest she steadfastly denied being the culprit. She accused the police of ignoring her claims, conducting coercive interrogations, and forcing her to provide fingerprints. The police, however, dismissed her allegations of misconduct. On April 1, 2000, the prosecution charged Kim Shin-yai with 2 counts and sought the death penalty. After navigating the preliminary, appellate and final trials, the Supreme Court sentenced her to life imprisonment. Yet even behind bars, Kim Shin-yai never wavered in proclaiming her innocence. She tirelessly sent letters to government agencies, civil society organizations, media outlets, and beyond, pleading her case. Her cause caught the attention of Park Jun-yang, a lawyer specializing in retrials. Thus began Kim Shin-yai's arduous journey toward justice. She was 27 years old, and this fight would span 25 years. According to attorney Park, the police investigation was riddled with serious procedural flaws and logical inconsistencies. The critical issue was that authorities had pegged Kim Shin-yai as the culprit from the outset. Despite her initial confession, the principle of presumed innocence demanded they explore multiple possibilities, not zero in on a single suspect with biased intent. This led to a failure to gather decisive evidence early in the case. When Kim Shin-yai recanted her confession, the case lacked any solid evidence to uphold her guilt. Take the sleeping pills. Allegedly, the murder weapon. Police initially claimed Kim Shin-yai crushed 30 dopamine pills into a bowl of rice and mixed them into liquor, wiping away spilled powder with a rack and discarding it in the trash. Typically, 30 dopamine pills would yield a blood concentration of about 4.7 micrograms per milliliter. To reach the level found in Kim Jun's blood, at least 100 pills would have been required. So, where did Kim Shin-yai acquire such a large quantity of pills? Police found no evidence of purchase nor traces of the drug in the rice bowl or rack at the house. Even the bottle of liquor Kim Jun's supposedly drank from, and the glass were never recovered. Crushing so many pills into powder would likely leave visible residue in the liquor. Wouldn't Kim Jun have grown suspicious seeing such a drink even if he consumed it without question? The dose would have induced immediate unconsciousness. How could he have walked downstairs and gotten into a car for a drive? Moreover, Kim Jun was not a small man, unlike Kim Shin-yae, who stood 5 feet 1 inch in and weighed 84 pounds. Could she have managed him alone? Crucially, no blood or hair from Kim Jun was found in the rental car she drove. While investigative techniques in 2000 were limited, no definitive evidence linked Kim Shin-yae to the crime. Additionally, police violated procedural protocols. They searched Kim Shin-yae's residence without a warrant. Of the two individuals conducting the search, only one was an authorized officer, the other was a military friend of the policeman. This rendered the search illegal, invalidating the evidence collected. Overall, the evidence used to convict Kim Shin-yae was deeply flawed. Beyond her initial confession, there was no clear proof of guilt, and some evidence even suggested her innocence, yet she was sentenced to life in prison. As the case gained media attention, it sparked heated public debate. Kim Shin-yae's retrial took a significant turn in January 2015 when the Korean Bar Association filed for a review. 15 years had passed since the incident. In November 2015, the Gwangju District Court approved the retrial request. This marked the first time a lifer in South Korea was granted a retrial. However, the prosecution's appeal led to a complex and protracted legal process. It wasn't until 2018 that the retrial was officially confirmed. Kim Shin-yae then endured another 7 years of waiting. On January 6, 2025, the prolonged retrial reached a pivotal moment. The court declared Kim Shin-yae not guilty. It ruled that the illegally obtained evidence was inadmissible and no decisive proof established her guilt. The court also acknowledged that her initial confession could have been coerced, leading to her acquittal. Thus, the suspect, arrested in 2000 and sentenced to life imprisonment, walked out of prison in 2025. However, the prosecution rejected the not guilty verdict and filed an appeal. Kim Shin-yae will attend the appellate trial while out on bail. If she is acquitted in both the appellate and final trials, she will become South Korea's longest and D5 longest wrongfully imprisoned person. Under current law, she would be eligible for criminal and state compensation amounting to millions of US dollars. In February 2025, the Korean investigative program Unanswered Questions aired a follow-up interview about the case, revealing details of Kim Shin-yae's life. After release, the episode garnered significant public attention. Living with her brother, her sole guardian, Kim Shin-yae exhibited severe paranoia. She claimed to be a Russian royal and the heir to a Chinese billionaire, insisting she faced no punishment and didn't need to attend trials. She declared her brother had long been dead, replaced by a North Korean dictator monitoring her. Among other shocking statements, her inconsistent and perplexing claims were accompanied by erratic behavior, such as showing reporters a notebook filled with cryptic symbols which she insisted proved her father Kim Jun had kidnapped her. One day, Kim Shin-yae packed her backpack and fled her brother's home. Reporters struggled to locate her at a police station where she refused to return, claiming everything was a setup to harm her and that she needed to escape to China. Experts believe her paranoia began around 2017 to 2018. After the 2015 retrial approval, her high hopes for freedom turned to despair as the process dragged on. Losing trust in others, she developed a defensive mindset, believing everyone was conspiring against her. During her 10-year retrial fight, her paranoia led her to fire attorney Park Jun-young 11 times. Each time, her brother rehired him outside court, further delaying the process. Throughout her 25 years in prison, Kim Shin-yae relentlessly proclaimed her innocence. She requested solitary confinement, rarely interacted with other inmates, and wrote incessantly about her wrongful conviction. The grueling years took a toll, making mental health challenges Almost inevitable, her family fears her unpredictable behavior could lead to dangerous outcomes. Consequently, she was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for monitoring and treatment. Experts warn that if her condition doesn't improve, future trials may proceed without her presence. Though free from prison, Kim Shin-hye has not reclaimed true freedom. Her 25 years of incarceration stole not only her youth but also her ability to live a normal life with her acquit. Kim Jun's case remains an unsolved mystery fraught with lingering questions. Consider the uncle-in-law who rarely interacted with Kim Shin-hye's family and shared no blood ties. Why did he involve himself so deeply in this case between Kim Shin-hye and her uncle-in-law? One of them must be lying, so who is the one twisting the truth? Another perplexing question. Even if her uncle-in-law pressured Kim Shin-hye to confess on behalf of her brother, why did she comply without resistance? Was her love for her half-brother so profound? This decision raises profound suspicions. If the uncle-in-law was the one fabricating, what could his motive have been? He had no apparent conflicts of interest with Kim Jun, and on the night of the incident he had a solid alibi, lacking both motive and opportunity to commit the crime. So if neither the uncle-in-law nor Kim Shin-hye was the perpetrator who orchestrated this crime and concealed it for 25 years, of course the court's not guilty verdict only establishes that there's insufficient evidence to convict Kim Shin-hye, not that she is entirely innocent. Even with an acquit escaping the shadow of public suspicion remains a daunting challenge. Her initial confession, the questionable insurance policies, the 4-hour gap without an alibi after arriving in Wando, the cryptic entries in her notebook, these elements leave a haunting question mark and a deep sense of regret. As the rain gently falls and the night grows deeper, thank you for joining me here at Mr. Nightcare True Crime Stories. Remind us of life's mysteries and the importance of staying aware even as we seek comfort in the quiet of the night. Let the rain carry you to a peaceful sleep, and until we meet again, stay safe, stay curious, and let the night watch over you.